Where's your phone?
In my pocket.
Can I see it? Yeah. Look, no cover. What a psychopath.
Yeah, that's the dream.
I never use a cover.
It's psychopath.
The only time I've got one tiny crack on the screen from where fucking Pete dropped it
Did I drop it?
in Africa. You know when it's in the locker.
I mean, that's not really my fault.
Whose fault is it?
Yours for not putting a case cover on it when we went for our sauna.
Yeah,
I fucking love a sauna.
I love it.
Love a sauna.
Love a sauna.
Love a sauna.
Love a cold plunge.
Hold on, there's a sauna in our building, isn't there?
Yeah, there is.
Oh, you should hit it.
I was trying to figure out that it might be up on a deck.
That's fine.
Oh, it's all right.
Get out into the cold first.
Yeah, that's nice.
You know who has a sick cold plunge is Grant Gilliam.
I'm going to be honest. I've never done a cold plunge and have zero interest in it.
Quite nice.
I love them.
Nah. I'll do a hot plunge.
Yeah, I get that. No, the cold plunge like meme, 100% accurate. It's awesome.
But is it?
You feel awesome.
As you're doing it or when you got out because you did it?
No, all of the above.
All right, I'll do one. I will do one. I mean, fucking Nashville is a cold plunge right now, buddy.
Yeah, exactly.
What's this all about? People who can't see or listening, we turned up in Nashville yesterday and we had a snowstorm. What, a foot of snow?
We're not
Half a
quite at
foot?
a foot, but we're definitely half a foot.
A lot of snow.
Like unseasonably once in 5 to 10 year type of snow.
So we never even get this much snow in the UK. Like where I live, you'll get it for a day and then it melts.
Yeah, that's typically what we get here.
Yeah.
So the typical Nashville snowstorm is 2 to 3 inches overnight, melted by the next night.
Yeah, that's what we have. And then you go to the park, and for about a week, there's big balls of snow that gradually melt because the kids have gone out on Great Snowman.
Yep.
That's it.
Yeah, no, this and we're supposed to have 7 or 8 days below freezing now.
Nice.
So it's
Love
gonna
it.
be an adventure of a week.
And then I'm going to Detroit, Windsor, Toronto, and Ottawa.
You're gonna have a good time.
I'm going to get cold.
Yeah. You're having a good winter.
Danny swerved it.
Yeah, I've got to go home.
Oh no.
Oh, no.
Yeah. I can't tell you why, but I've got to go home.
Yeah. And then see him again in April
Okay.
in Bedford, which you'll come into.
I'm gonna be in the great city of Bedford,
It's a town.
the great capital of the UK, Bedford, England.
We have not been granted city status yet.
Well, that's because Bitcoin investment is still early.
Yeah, man. April, we'll have you there. It's going to be surreal.
Pete, what is your 10-year vision for Bedford?
Oh, okay. You're interviewing me. Okay. My 10-year vision. I would be the happiest guy in the world. 10 years' time, our men's team are in the professional leagues.
Mhm.
So I think I've explained this to you before. We have 4 professional leagues. Premier League, Championship, League 1, League 2. Promotion and relegation. And then you go into non-league.
Mm-hmm.
And they refer to them as steps. So the first tier of non-league is called step 1. But to keep it easy, that's the 5th tier. And you can go all day. I think it has turned to about 12th tier. And then you got Sunday league and county stuff.
Yeah.
So when I bought the team, we were in the 10th. We won the league, we're in the 9th. We're now 7 points clear at the top of the 9th.
Mm-hmm.
So we might go to the 8th. And so that's 4 promotions away from the professional leagues.
Mm-hmm.
If in 10 years we've got into that, that would be amazing. It's going to get progressively harder
Mm-hmm.
because your budget really to have a go at getting into the from the tier 5 into the professional leagues is like, I mean, Wrexham and Notts County, their wage bill is like 2 million.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot. So, but anyway, there's that. And I think with that, I can get our ladies up into the 3rd tier of theirs, maybe even the 2nd.
Mm-hmm.
With that, I'm going to need a training center and an academy.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd love to have a place with a couple of pitches and a school where kids at 16, if they don't want to go to normal school, they can come to ours. They'll train, boys and girls, they'll train half a day every day,
Mm-hmm.
and the other half a day is in a classroom. I'd like to think that course would be around the kind of things we're interested in, but it'll probably be some kind of sports science. And then I'd like to have a stadium, which is probably our version of Bitcoin Park.
Okay.
In that it is a stadium, but it's also our office, but maybe has a shared office space, and maybe
A social hall.
a social hall. Maybe we run our conference in there one year. Maybe we have workshops. Maybe we have a little kind of small amount of seed investment we do into some things, but something to push and promote Bitcoin. But that's my 10-year plan. I'd love to do it. We're 2 years in. Everything has gone almost perfect.
Okay. And it went perfectly in a bear market.
It did. Well, this is the thing. Because, okay, what I'm quite interested in is people who build. No, let me flip this another way. Somebody said to us the other day, I can't remember, you'll remind me who it was. They said, a lot of people keep saying, I want to work in Bitcoin. And you don't have to work in Bitcoin. You can be the Bitcoin person in your fiat company, and you can find the other Bitcoin person, and you can start to spread it there. And building Bitcoin companies is really hard. We know this, right? Because of bear markets. It's hard anyway, but bear market. You make most of your money in 1 year, and then you have like half a year where it's still good. And then half a year starts to get a bit tricky, and then a really shitty year, and then another year where you're kind of like hopium coming out. That's a hard cycle without the consistency.
So you're saying green, 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 red?
Yeah, but it's more like green, red, and 2 yellows.
Yeah, green, yellow, yellow, red.
Yeah, green again,
And then green again.
Yeah, but what's really interesting is if you build like our football team, the price of Bitcoin doesn't really affect it. In that, whatever the price of Bitcoin is, on a Saturday, people want to watch a game of football. They come and drink a beer. They buy a burger, they buy a program, they go home. We may sell a few less hoodies online, but generally speaking, that business is fine. Pub key. In a bear market, people still go to the pub, get wasted and eat a smash burger.
Yep.
So actually, taking traditional big businesses, layering on the Bitcoin cheat code means that I actually think what it does, you take a normal business and you're adding 20 to whatever percent improvement because you got Bitcoin.
Yep.
But when Bitcoin's in a bear market, it's not going to destroy your business. Like how many Bitcoin businesses have come and gone? Probably because of bear markets.
More than I can count or remember.
So yeah, I'm keen on the cheat code. I'm keen on the idea in this next bull market. People like Cash App. Cash App's another one.
Yeah. Everybody's got to send money.
Yeah. So layering Bitcoin into other companies or people taking other companies and laying Bitcoin into it, I think that's a bullish. I think we need more of that.
I'll come back with 2 things I think about on this topic. One is that what you said about the need for traditional businesses to be Bitcoin enabled or Bitcoin integrated is the whole ballgame, right? I'm still buying beef. I'm still hiring my plumber. I'm still doing, there's an endless litany of things that I need to do to maintain quality of life that have nothing to do with the price of Bitcoin. And I am an inelastic buyer of all of those things, which means all of those businesses can benefit from a Bitcoin strategy.
Well, just to interrupt there, because you said, plumbers, you're still a buyer, right? Some guy got in touch with me. Is like, how do I apply the cheat code to my plumbing business? I was like, look, dude, just become the Bitcoin plumber.
Yeah.
Be that on Twitter and on your website, have that you accept Bitcoin. And by the way, if you live near me, you're probably going to be my plumber. And the reason you're going to be my plumber, obviously I need to check your work out. But as you're the Bitcoin plumber, I engage with you on the assumption that we've got some similar values and opinions, yada, yada. If there's a problem, I think I'm going to be able to call you. You're going to come and fix it. It's no issue. We're probably going to get on. We're going to be friends, yada, yada. And I said, you may only get 5 or 10% more customers because of that. But that 5 or 10%, that's just...
are yours forever.
Yeah, and it's just net profit.
Exactly. I think I was saying this to Hodl like 2.5 years ago, that the reason that Bitcoin community is still so special is that you get 80 to 90% of the way towards friendship before you ever meet.
100%.
Yeah.
Right? So
that.
you just need to close the last 10 or 20% gap to becoming great friends. And that's, that's what Bitcoin did, is that it created a social layer that was just significantly more functional than our traditional social layer. We don't have to argue about what candidate do you care about, what political party, sports team are you rooting for this 4 years? Like none of that stuff matters because we've actually layered up and come to an ideological alignment much earlier in the conversation process, so that when you show up as friends, there's so little to cover to get from strangers to friends.
Well, if you think about it like this, if you were to vote into an election, why do people vote? What do they think their vote means to them?
That's a really tricky question.
I think it's easy. I think you vote because you think if you change the party to the party you want, or keep the party in power that you want, that's going to make your life better.
I agree with that.
You're going to get more money.
Yeah, it's basically majority comes down to money. Some's probably a little bit ideological,
Mm-hmm.
but like mainly it comes down to that person is promising you the taxes, the welfare, whatever it is you want for your life, right?
Yeah.
But I think we've all come to the conclusion that a Bitcoin standard or hyper Bitcoinized world, that world is going to do far more for what we want than any political party. So we're voting orange, right?
Yes. Single issue voters.
And then we don't clash, really.
No.
I mean, there's some arguments over whatever bullshit, but generally, directionally, we all kind of agree the same things.
One of the things we were talking at dinner last night about was that, there's really sort of two fronts that the war is happening on right now. One of them is like the reshaping or maintaining of the shape of Bitcoin as it is today, right? There's a war over today's Bitcoin.
Yeah.
The other one is around all of the edges of where Bitcoin has touched and penetrated thus far and expanding that territory. And, I think the well-informed Bitcoiner needs to spend time on both, but it's really a function of the ratio. So I spend just enough time on the internal side to make sure that I have an informed view on what I think is good for Bitcoin, and making sure that there's a technical and development track that line of thinking goes down, but then there's also a cultural line of thinking that also goes down. But I care a lot more about where can Bitcoin go next.
Well, so we were saying to you last night, we get a lot of kind of data points by just making the show that give us an indication where things are going. And yeah, we have to question, are we making this show for us? Are we making this show for Bitcoiners? Are we making the show for anyone who is or could be a Bitcoiner? Or are we making it for Bitcoin? And so when I say Bitcoin, should we be having debates about scaling on our show? The data says probably not, because
If we're being selfish, probably not.
yeah, but if you look at the numbers, they're just so low. We can get on brilliant people discussing the scaling. The numbers are low when we talk about anthropology, philosophy, use cases, ETFs. The things are really high, and I think it's to do with the ratio, right? As the show gets bigger, we've got more and more people who are coming in who don't care about the technical shit. Like, go and figure that out for me. They don't care. And so what's going to probably happen is that we would probably do less of that.
Yeah.
That's Stefan Lavera. He's better at it. He's got the right audience. That's maybe Marty and Matt.
It
It's
could be
less us.
Noted. It could be Pierre and Bitstein. Like there's venues for that discussion.
And ours probably ends up being more kind of like the mainstream. And it's a real signal, because that ratio is important.
But at the same time, I think it's important that we do those shows occasionally and accept that it's not going to perform as well because they are important to Bitcoin.
Yeah, it's probably how we make them, though, right?
Yes.
Should we have a deep debate on the pros and cons of CTV, or should we be talking about a bit more generic about what it is, what it means, and what it would mean to you as a user?
And I think who you do it with, because sometimes like you can have a very technical person that just can't bridge that gap. And so like they would be amazing maybe on a Stefan, but where we can't speak the same language, you need someone that can translate from the very technical to the sort of normal Bitcoin.
Yeah, I think everything you're describing is a guest, is like a guest arena idea where, the person writing the spec for the update on the BIP, it might not be the right person.
Yeah.
There's somebody else living in the translation layer that needs to make that an approachable concept for your audience. Because I think, the personal responsibility piece of being a Bitcoiner and being an informed Bitcoiner is something that, we don't want to lose, right? Like it's important that people know what's going on and are able to advocate for their own best interest and their own needs. And so how can we empower those people to have those opinions and make their voices heard, without them needing to, go to coding boot camp and learn C++. Like that's not a scalable solution, but there is a huge market opportunity for the translation layer to empower those people to be informed and to make their perspective heard.
I have a feeling we're going to look.
I can't believe you didn't notice that earlier.
I did. He kind of looks weird in green.
Yeah.
Did you see who did the one? I did it with Drake. Did you see the Drake one?
Yeah, I saw that one.
So the Drake. So there are 3 green ones like that and a red one like, you know, yeah. I Daddy. I have a feeling we may look back on 2024 as one of the most important years of Bitcoin. I think quite interesting that the 15 years
To the day.
15 years since Hal Finney put out his famous tweet, we get the ETFs. I think we're going to look back at this year and go, that was the bit we flipped from niche world of nerds to everyone. And I know there's pre-stuff that's happened.
Let me offer you a different frame of pre-stuff of nerds.
This is why we love Harry.
I would say that we have ended the end of the beginning.
Yeah, we've gone from that early minority to early majority.
We are done. The beginning is over.
Where's the S curve? I'll show you where I think we're on the S curve.
Yeah. So there's the end of the beginning and the beginning of the middle. And we've just started to straddle the end of the beginning into the beginning of the middle.
I think we have gone from early adopters to early majority in this curve.
Yeah. And I think, you know, the same way that like venture funds are thought of in vintages, because there's a technology backdrop across what you're able to build at a point in time, right? I was just looking at this. Amazon was founded in 1994.
Wow. Okay.
Right. So it's important to have historical context around
30 years old.
30 years old.
Still feels like a new company.
Still feels like a new company.
Yeah.
That's the Jeff Bezos day one. So if for your listeners, if you're looking for some non-Bitcoin business reading, all of the early Amazon shareholder letters are just like some of the most brilliant business writing on the planet. And Jeff Bezos has this concept called day one, which is that every day the company needs to approach the market as if it's day one. You need to win customers for the first time. You need to build scalable technical backgrounds into your products like it's day one, like you approached it for the first time. And so to me, that's one of the reasons that they've been able to achieve such incredible compounding returns, not just on their share price, but also on invested capital. So look at how Amazon raised money and look at where they deployed that money. Their number one CapEx spend is in their logistics. Right. So their product quality was going to go up over time because Bezos had the insight that nobody on planet Earth wants their package later. Nobody on planet Earth wants their good more expensive. So if we can always align around the idea of delivering low cost and delivering sooner and more timely with more predictability, those are going to be things that are going to earn customers return visits at a significantly expanding rate. So that was their number one CapEx deployment. The second one was in AWS.
Incredible. It was a weird one because when they first announced it, you're like, why are they going into this?
And they just said it's the same product, right? If you're a seller of a good, you plug your good into the Amazon marketplace, and there's a huge amount of infrastructure backend that takes what would be a localized cost and would be highly inefficient, which is hiring a shipping container and sending it across the ocean yourself and buying and renting your own warehouse and then hiring a service to take it from the warehouse to the person. You're able to compress a 2-week turnaround into a 24 to 48 hour turnaround because they've built this sort of infinitely scalable or semi-infinitely scalable backend. They did the same exact thing with servers. And they said, okay, the current status quo is to basically use on-prem bare metal. That means I need to go contract with a data center for rack space. I need to have a vendor who's going to send me all of the servers. I need developers who are going to be able to spin up all of the server backend work. And so all of a sudden, my burn rate and my cost structure as a startup is, I don't know, 5 to 10x what it would be otherwise.
Look, I remember when we had our web agency, pre-AWS. We had to do a deployment of a website.
Exactly.
They needed their own servers, and we had to have backup servers. We had to find somewhere to locate them. It was a pain. I didn't do it, but it was a pain.
No, but not only was it a pain, it was also expensive.
Very expensive.
So what AWS did is exactly what logistics did for the store listings. AWS did for startups being able to scale their backend. And so it's the same product fundamentally, right? You take something that's a high cost, high complexity, repeatable problem across a large number of companies, You automate it and abstract it so that it becomes a single line item that you then don't have to manage. It's managed by somebody with a huge operating budget. And what Amazon's able to do is they're able to shift their cost structure deeply into the CapEx, and they're able to run highly efficiently on OpEx on the other side of it.
What does that mean for Bitcoin?
It means for Bitcoin that like we're crossing our 1994 chasm right now, where
crossing the chasm. Steve Black wrote the book.
I don't know who wrote that book.
I think it's Steve Black or Blank.
It's a good book.
It's a brilliant book.
Jeffrey Moore.
Oh, can you search Steve Black or Blank, see if it comes up with it? Because he did something like that. I think he wrote a book.
Yeah, I think he did as well. Maybe there's 2 books because of the same name.
Yeah, I'm sure he did.
So these are, what the reason this is relevant, the reason there are takeaways for Bitcoin and Bitcoin companies is that the category winners could take 20 to 30 years to emerge. And the reason for that is that compounding returns, you don't notice the difference between 0.001 and 0.002 and 0.004 and 0.008. Those are all massive growth numbers, but it's still such a small number. And so if you zoom out on a line, that looks like a straight line, but it's actually an exponential curve. It just hasn't reared its head in the visible way yet. And so there are going to be Bitcoin companies that are going to achieve year 5, year 10, year 20 type of compounding. We just haven't been alive long enough for those to rear their head. Google, 98. So it's important to remember how old these companies are because it adds additional context when you say, my favorite Bitcoin company isn't as big as I expected it to be.
Yeah. Well, this is why I think Lightspark, David Marcus?
Yep.
Yeah, they've been so smart. I don't know if you saw it. I mean, he raised something like 186 million. I'm like, huh? Most of companies in your competitor set have raised like, I don't know.
10, 20.
Yeah, maybe. And I don't know why he's done it. But all I know is if he wants, he's got a massive runway. A massive runway.
Time in a startup, a true software startup, I should say. The single most important variable is velocity over time. And so if you're able to very rapidly and effectively iterate on product, talk to all your customers, get an enormous amount of feedback, and then apply time to that cycle. I'm reading a biography of a Air Force general who invented a concept called the OODA loop, which is what he describes as sort of an infinitely scalable operating model. So me at the individual Bitcoiner level, I can run an OODA loop, which stands for observe, orient, decide, act, repeat. And so that's actually a scalable idea all the way up the system level and all the way down to the individual level. And so me as an individual Bitcoiner, I observe. I say, okay, well, there's a lot of risk in these, leverage Bitcoin exchanges and shitcoin exchanges that are all going to blow up. I observe those. I orient. I say, okay, what is the pathway for me to be able to mitigate that risk? I say, okay, I decide. Putting Bitcoin on a hardware wallet, self-custody, cold storage. Then I act. I call Rodolfo. I buy a cold card. I move the Bitcoin. And then I observe again. And then I orient again. And then I decide again. And then I act again. And so the winners of any system, whether it's an individual winner, a company winner, or a country winner, are the people who are able to run through that loop the most times and the fastest. And so that is the explanatory process as to why winners win and losers lose, is that they haven't gone through that process fast enough. This is why bureaucracy is such a killer.
Yeah.
Is because the number of times you can move through your loop is hindered by the bureaucratic processes that you assign to your system. And so somebody else without those bureaucratic kind of pumping the brake factors, they're going to move through much faster, which means they're going to be on decision 3 by the time you're on decision 1. And so they've observed and oriented twice before you've finished your first act.
So what kind of companies do you think are going to be these? What are going to be the Googles of Bitcoin, like category-wise? Obviously, we're going to have huge industrial miners. We understand that. We have...
What are those like?
Yeah. Do you know any?
Yeah, I know a couple.
We also have the on-ramp, off-ramp. That they've been like, I think, the 2 consistently proven business models that work.
Exchanges and mining have provable revenues.
Yeah, and hardware wallets have done okay. We have a quite competitive market for that. Beyond that, What else? What do you think? Because if you look at the infrastructure,
Mhm.
the likes of the Lightspark, the voltage, the biggest challenge they have is Bitcoin's primary use case is doing nothing.
And a lot of them are very early still, I think.
Yeah. So they need the runway. Now, look, there will come a time when either we want to move it more or we have to move it more. But at the moment, they're building out the infrastructure for a use case that isn't truly there just yet.
Yeah, I think Noster is doing a really interesting kind of end around on what you're describing, which is that I've spent a lot of time with Million at Primal. Obviously Damus is out there, and there's a number of other clients and tools that are out there. I think that when you look at category winners in Bitcoin, it's really a function of sort of there's three kind of core ideas. The first is, I think mining, we talked a little bit about, but it's just such an obvious permissionless revenue business where I don't have to invest, at Griid, we don't have to invest in a sales team. We don't have to invest in a marketing team in the same way that a business that's looking to acquire customers is. So the corporate structure is just fundamentally different and generates all of its revenue in Bitcoin. That's a unique and exciting thing. I think then the second category I'm going to call financial institutions. And I think, buy, sell Bitcoin is one function, but also all of the financial engineering layers around Bitcoin, which I think, some people can't stand, but I think they're just sort of inevitable and net positive. The ETF falls into a category like that. The Unchained Loan program falls into a category like that. But there's sort of this financial layer. And then the third, I think is where the most time needs to be applied to the business models. But the transacting layer, the movement of Bitcoin layer, and
the Visa killer.
The Visa killer, but I think what's so interesting about Noster is that, and I'll use Primal as an example because I'm the most familiar, but they came to market with a native Strike app Lightning wallet in every download of the Primal app. And so there's and what Mutiny's done, they sort of have a base layer Venmo product baked into everything they're doing. And so
adding those Noster contact to that was genius.
Genius. And so, all of a sudden you're starting to see, and I think there's a barbell effect happening where on the one hand, you are moving 10,000, 50,000, multi-million-dollar Bitcoin on chain in sort of a very systematic, segmented way. On the other end, you're seeing, I got a zap for 21 sats. What we haven't seen are the $5 to $500 transactions proliferate, but we've seen the sub $5 proliferate on Noster and in Lightning, and we've seen the multi-tens of thousands proliferate on chain, big transaction settlement. Like each of those are maturing really interestingly. The middle is sort of the uncharted water at this point, where Bitcoin hasn't figured out its sort of mid transaction size use case in a scalable way yet. And so I keep an eye there, but I also just think like the small payment permission, marrying permissionless speech to permissionless money is just a trend I don't want to be short. I just think like, we've just seen censorship regimes both on financial transactions and on speech in a way that we haven't seen in the last 20 years. Kind of since COVID, we've just seen, the willingness to censor be a bigger theme. And now we finally have some tooling that might be able to offset some of that trend. And I think that's good and valuable.
Yeah. No, I agree. I don't think there's a huge amount of demand for it. I think there's way more demand for free speech than there is for censorship-resistant transactions.
Maybe in America.
Look, I mean, all right, different parts of the world have, different geographies have different use cases. I just think it's coming, but it's behind.
Oh, it's for sure it's behind.
Yeah. That's not to say it's not important either.
But
I actually just think permissionless transacting is actually probably a bigger use case than censorship resistant transacting in that, people can just spin up and they can just, like I can go out to Malawi and I can tell somebody quickly, just download this app. Here's some Bitcoin.
Yes.
That kind of thing. I think that's going to be more important than. I know they're hand in hand.
Yeah, I mean,
Can't
I
have one
think
without the other,
I
but-
think that of course, and I think the market, if you just look at the market cap of all the social media companies, private and public, much smaller than the market cap of all the financial institutions, private and public, much smaller than the market cap of money, much smaller than the market cap of gold. So I agree with you. I think the market's already decided the ratio between those two ideas. Doesn't mean there isn't $100 billion opportunity in social media. But I think the opportunity in money and the product market fit that Bitcoin's achieved in money is both bigger and faster and maybe more obvious.
So flipping it back to what I was saying about this being one of the most important years, that crossing the chasm.
Mm-hmm.
What chasm do you think we've crossed? Because there's multiple chasms. Like I'll say the chasm I think we've crossed is a vast reduction in the regulatory threat. In that we now have potentially, as long as they're not nefarious, as long as they're not co-opted for a different reason, but I kind of feel like we've got Larry Fink and a bunch of other CEOs of large institutions who are now incentivized to defend the properties of Bitcoin. And also, on top of that, as this spreads out to the various portfolios and pension funds, we suddenly have, maybe we go from millions to tens of, just in the US alone, tens of millions of people, maybe more than 100, maybe half the population has some exposure to Bitcoin.
Everybody who owns the S&P 500 has exposure to Bitcoin.
There you go.
Right. So this was something I thought a lot about really originally when Square, now Block, made their balance sheet Bitcoin allocations, is that, Square is included in all of these index funds. Literally, if you own the S&P 500, you own Bitcoin.
Vanguard owns 8.2% of
MicroStrategy.
MicroStrategy, the motherfuckers.
Well, and this is I hate being bearish and I hate being short, right? I just think it's a horrible way to live. Where if I woke up in 1908 and I said, I'm really a horse and buggy guy, or if I woke up in 1980 and said, I'm really a mainframe guy, personal computing isn't a thing that's going to really proliferate, or if I woke up in 2005 and said, I just watched. Have you ever seen Cruel Intentions?
No.
Yeah.
Yes, I have. The film.
The film. There's a line in the film where there's a whole letter writing subplot in that movie, and they talk about email, and they said email is just for nerds and pedophiles. And I'm sitting there, and that movie came out in 1999, and I'm like, this is how most people think. When a new technology comes to market, they say this is for nerds and criminals.
Have you seen the video of Bowie talking to Jeremy Paxman? Where he's talking about the very early days of the internet.
No.
And Paxman's saying...
Can you get it?
Yeah, let me get it up. It's amazing. And he's in, this is like I think in the 90s, and he's talking about how it's going to change the way that you consume content. And he got it that early. Let me find it. Oh, I need the control.
Oh, drive it up on the...
But what is it specifically about the internet? I mean, anybody can say anything. And it all adds up to what? I mean, it seems to me there's nothing cohesive about it in the way that there was something cohesive about the youth revolution in music.
Oh, but absolutely. And because I think that we, at the time, up until at least the mid-70s, really felt that we were still living under the, in the guise of a single and absolute created society where there were known truths and known lies, and there was no kind of duplicity or pluralism about the things that we believed in. That started to break down rapidly in the 70s, and the idea of a duality in the way that we live. There are always 2, 3, 4, 5 sides to every question. That the singularity disappeared, and that, I believe, has produced such a medium as the internet, which absolutely establishes and shows us that we are living in total fragmentation. I don't think we've even seen the tip of the iceberg. I think the potential of what the internet is going to do to society, both good and bad, is unimaginable. I think we're actually on the cusp of something exhilarating and terrifying.
It's just a tool, though, isn't it?
No, it's not. No. Now it's an alien life form.
What do you think? I mean, when
You could be talking about Bitcoin.
think then about
Or
Is
AI.
there life on Mars? Yes, it's just landed here.
but it's simply a different delivery system there.
Could also be
You're
Nashville.
arguing about something more profound.
Oh yeah, I'm talking about the actual context and the state of content is going to be so different to anything that we can really envisage at the moment, where the interplay between the user and the provider will be so in simpatico. It's going to crush our ideas of what mediums are all about.
Well, it's like every important innovation you can put in there. Certainly technical. Every single one. Internet, you can put AI in there. I mean, that's the exact exhilarating and terrifying.
I will take you back to the 1800s when John Rockefeller started so John Rockefeller grew out of this Western Pennsylvania, Ohio River Valley oil boom. And, he didn't figure out how to drill oil better. He started to build a strategic footprint around refineries in a different way. But the core innovations that he brought to bear were really around the transport, the rail car system. So, I use the rail car system all the time because I think it's such a clean crossover to Bitcoin. Think about the width of a train car. The width, let's say I built a totally innovative new train car design, but it's 4 feet wider. Doesn't run on any of the existing system. Useless. Doesn't matter how good a train car I build. It doesn't function within the networked system that we have today. And so every rail car is now constrained to this design requirement, which is the width of the wheels needs to be a certain 100% prescribed distance, because there's a massive network of rail that moves a huge amount of goods all over the country, whether it's, to the capital of Bedford or in America. We are locked in to this one design choice. That's a function of the way that Rockefeller and the railroad barons proliferated the movement of oil across America.
Is that prescribed the size and shape of what containers have to be that go on ships as well? Because containers have to go on lorries and on
Exactly.
train tracks. Yeah.
So a shipping container, and we use shipping containers in our mining facilities and love them because they are a standard unit. They are the unit of account for trade functionally. Yeah. They fit on a boat, they fit on a trailer, and they fit on a train car.
Yeah.
And so they're this common code that lets international trade and domestic trade function, because the size, the weight, all of the spec is cross-functional between boat, truck, and rail.
And that's actually, and Lynn Alden uses it. There's a measure of the cost of moving a container, and that's a measure of the economy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Because, economies have two ideas. There's sort of a capital, we're going to use stock and flow properly.
Big up Plan B.
I can't endorse.
I bet he's posting the chart every day.
He will be.
He'll
be trying to claim it's back.
Of course. There's a capital stock in an economy, and then there's a flow in an economy. And so the flow of goods is sort of this first derivative or second derivative of the economic health in the system around us. So there's companies that build up inventory, but then there's the movement of said inventory and the cost of that movement and how that gets attributed to global margins across multiple companies.
Can you get back that chart with the
early adopters?
Yeah. See, I do see this as a pivotal year for a number of reasons.
It's because Griid went public.
There you go.
You got to get that shill in there.
Griid went public. Royal Bedford, both men's and ladies teams will win their leagues.
This one might actually be more interesting because there's the chasm that I think we may have just crossed.
So tech enthusiasts. Okay, so that's like Peter Todd, Greg Maxwell, Adam Back, and then you get visionaries. That's your Bitsteins, your Pierres.
You.
Shut up, man. They've messed the gap, which is the lucky people, the pragmatists, the conservatives.
Where are the podcasters on this?
Yeah, where are the podcasters? The laser-eyed podcasters.
I view all the ETFs as pragmatists.
Well, what's quite interesting now is we still have this layer of skeptics coming out with these same arguments that they sound more ridiculous over time, but there is this resistance to Bitcoin that some people still have. Whether it's that CNN woman all week this week, I sent you a video as well. You should put that up. It's the same arguments, but it's. I wonder at what point they give up.
I mean, the good news is that they were a lot more threatening 5 years ago.
Of course, yeah. Well, that's why I say this year is so important.
Yeah.
Because what they're doing, these people are now arguing against Larry Fink.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, listen to
Is
this
this one you mean?
Yeah, play this.
Why would I take cash against those other two options? Because I think cash returns will, certainly exceed Bitcoin on current valuations. It's fraud hiding in plain sight, greater fool theory, all of these things characterize cryptocurrencies. It's as old as the hills. Private currencies eventually, it attracts sort of deviants and fraudsters, and Bitcoin will be no different. It's just in a digital form rather than a vegetable.
I'm here for the deviants.
Yeah. But this is Times columnist Simon French, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder, with someone like him, how much have you actually looked at Bitcoin? Like, how much have you read some articles, and you've formed your opinions from those articles you've read? A bit like your kids grow up a bit like you because they form their opinions from what they hear their parents say. Has he read some articles, or has he actually gone down the rabbit hole? Because what was really interesting, when we were out in Africa recently, we had Ian Burrell with us, who is a journalist.
Yep.
How skeptical was he at the start?
He was so uninterested. He was there, but he spends a lot of time in Africa anyway, doing other work. And so he was really interested to come and see the site. And I think the Gridless site in Malawi interest him a little, but in Bitcoin, zero interest. He was very skeptical about it.
Yeah, but he spent
skeptical about us, I think, as a group. He was a bit worried about who he was going to sort of be rubbing shoulders with for the week.
But this is a very credible journalist, highly credible journalist. Yeah. And by the end of it, he decided to write an article, and it's probably one of the best articles I've seen written about Bitcoin in the last year, because it wasn't. You get great articles by Nick Carter's, right?
Mm-hmm.
Somebody who understands Bitcoin intrinsically, he understands the arguments for or against, and he just writes beautifully. This is somebody who has very little understanding or exposure to Bitcoin, and he just presented what he saw based on facts. Yeah, it wasn't like a hugely pro Bitcoin article. It was hugely factual.
It was pragmatic. He's in that group.
Yeah. But he did the work and now understands a bit more about what it is. I wonder if someone like Simon French has basically read a few articles in the New York Times or the Times themselves, and he's come to these old conclusions.
I also think like there's a few categories of skepticism that are maybe equally maddening, but variably maddening. You know, there's the greater fool theory, intrinsic value. There's no cash flows to Bitcoin, and you know, it's not a company, and therefore it's uninvestable or unallocatable. And I think that, to me, that is like patently the most ignorant. Where, you know, the same argument can be made about gold, it can be made about silver, it can be made about, you know, pick your commodity. Commodities don't have cash flows. It's not a company. It's a good that you dig out of the ground or you dig out of the server. And that's just, you know, very, very hard for people to digest. And I think the reason that they're not making the same kind of fraudulent claims about gold is that they have not spent any time digging into your point, even more than they haven't spent time digging into Bitcoin, they specifically haven't given any time digging into why Bitcoin achieves provable digital scarcity and permissionless transaction processing. So like they at such a deep fundamental level don't grok the value proposition and why Bitcoin is able to deliver on the value proposition.
I think there's another thing also. Simon French, I'm going to guess, I could be wrong here, I'm going to guess he probably first heard about Bitcoin in about 2013. I'm going to guess.
I have a great example for this.
I could be wrong. Oh, you're going to search if he's tweeted about it, aren't you?
I wasn't, but I was going to pull up the Salinity index that
Craig Warmke's. And he definitely heard about it in 2017. And he certainly heard about it in 2021. And I think he missed the Bitcoin gold rush in his head.
Mm-hmm.
None of us missed the gold rush.
The gold rush is in the future.
Like, I think a lot of these people they miss the gold rush of Bitcoin, what they perceive it as, and they see a bunch of people who've got rich and wealthy off it, and I think it pisses them off.
And I think it's who got rich and wealthy is
Yeah.
part of the saltiness.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know,
The degens, the rock stars.
the dumbest guy they know.
Yeah.
The most ignorant guy they know, the most arrogant guy they know or woman they know.
Yeah, and the funny, and it's the person who's willing to go, fuck off, I don't care what you think.
Yeah.
Because, I tweeted about the other day, I said, there's two ways of dealing with no coiners and their objections. You can try and enter into a well-articulated intellectual debate, or you can laugh in their face and say, have fun staying poor. And I think both are equally valid. Because in the end, it's like once you get your head around the inevitability, because I think there's an inevitability, you don't really have to care. What did Mr. Hoddle tweet?
Which one?
Was it once you accept Bitcoin's inevitability, you find it funny or something?
Oh, let me find
It becomes
it.
a
I
lot
know
more
the one you
funny.
mean.
Yeah. The area that I would highlight from another recent example is there's this guy from one of the environmental
New
magazines.
Scientist.
Yeah, New Scientist.
Yeah.
This guy, I mean, he's all over Twitter in 2013. He had whatever, a significant amount of Bitcoin. He traded and sold, and then he comes out with these insane, frankly, responses to Bitcoin's environmental impact, and then says, well, show me the peer-reviewed work. And then there's like 20 different articles put into his replies that cover all of the really, really good peer-reviewed work. There's stuff out of Cornell, there's stuff out of KPMG that all essentially
Debunk him.
not only debunk him, but very, very credibly demonstrate that the Bitcoin environmental impact is significantly lower than almost every peer industry.
But wasn't he citing what's his name?
DeVries.
DeVries,
Yeah.
Who is the ultimate hack.
Yeah.
His data analysis is just patently wrong and bad. And he was cited all over the White House's Office of OSTP, Office of Science and Technology. He's cited all over that content, and he's cited all over the Amy Castors of the world and all of these other kind of mega anti-Bitcoin people. And his analysis is just bad. Right. It's so I think there's a and this will get us maybe into Infinite Pizzagate. But there's an innumeracy that the skeptics are holding on to where, we talk a lot about illiteracy on planet Earth. What doesn't get any coverage is innumeracy, where if I'm handed a set of, relatively simple math equations, do I have the numerical basis to be able to deal with them? And I think that what we see amongst our skeptics is that they do not have an ability to engage with data and numbers in a coherent way. And that's how you get to these types of divisibility problems where they're like, well, Bitcoin's not scarce because it's infinitely or semi-infinitely divisible. Well, that's not how any of this works, right? If I cut a pizza into quarters, I don't have more pizza.
You don't then have 4 pizzas.
I don't have 4 pizzas.
That's not true. Show my this is not true. I tested this back in 2020.
Did you retweet this recently?
Yeah, I did. I tested this in 2020. So I phoned up Domino's, got myself a margarita in. Look, I cut it into 8 and I actually.
But the infinite pizza thing blows my mind. I don't understand how people get tripped up on this.
They think it's more units.
I don't even want to try to put myself in their shoes and explain it. The more upsetting problem within all of this is what else are they in charge of that they're bringing this quality of thinking to?
Hopefully not schooling kids. Well,
Yeah.
it's like this. Imagine the pounds. We have pence. We have 2 decimal places. We have 100 pence. They would say, because of computers, if you wanted to go to micropence, you could go to 4 decimal places.
Sure.
You now have 1,000 units. That's
Sure.
what they have.
But it changes nothing about the value of the.
No, I know. It's the pre-decimal that sets the value, right?
Yeah.
The reason and let's just go all the way to the left side of the curve.
That's where I'm comfortable.
Well,
It's where I live.
our podcast is the left side of the curve interviewing the right side of the curve.
Well, I'll shed my right side of the curve mask for a moment and just say, if I have a bar of gold and I cut it into tiny little pieces, I don't have more gold. I have the same amount of gold cut up into little tiny pieces. And so Nobody's willing to pay me the price of, and that's why you do it by weight. So think of a Bitcoin like a bar of gold. If I cut it into sats, I have the same Bitcoin. There's still 1 out of 21 million, same denominator. You know, if you cut the numerator into sats, you've got whatever 2.1 quadrillion sats. You have to apply the same division to the denominator as well. So you solve the equation. We go back to enumeracy. You have the same percentage of the circulating supply, whether it's denominated in Bitcoin or if it's denominated in sats. Like, this is not, we're not breaking new ground here. We're doing fractions.
I do love Bitcoiners though, because she I think of have you seen World War Z?
No.
You've never seen World War Z?
I've never seen World War Z.
Oh my God, how have you not seen this film? Get the clip of the zombies at the wall in Israel. This to me is Bitcoiners when they see someone with a idiotic argument against Bitcoin. Yeah, this is me. This is Bitcoin.
This is a 6-minute clip.
That's us. That's us.
Yeah.
I bet you now, if you go to Twitter your homepage of Twitter, how many posts are going to have pizza in them? I mean, I could be
Surely
wrong.
this is over now.
No. Let's see how many pizzas we can get. Because mine was full of pizza this morning.
Mine's just full of fights now.
Yeah, fights. Oh, maybe it's missed yours.
Now we know Danny's feet is healthy and
Yeah.
Peter's feet is sick.
Mine is
I've
trolls.
used so many words.
There we go.
There we go.
Infinite pizza.
Oh.
Yeah, I mean, look, they've come for that.
Well, and you know, but there may be this underlying.
You've got the point in the oceans part.
Yeah. Oh my God. Just so there's two things happening.
Yeah.
One is just that the trend of acceptable data that these folks are going to be willing to
cite.
tolerate is growing and growing really well. So it's happening on the energy front. You know, Bitcoin is just not an environmental problem. It is an environmental solution. It's happening. It's getting built out everywhere. Iris is doing it. Griid is doing it. Lots of different miners are choosing these power sources, not because they're, you know, righteous tree huggers, but because they have economic interest in the long-term viability of their mining operations. And so they're selecting the lowest marginal cost generation sources, which also happen to be the least carbon intensive ones as well, because we don't have to buy a barrel of oil to spin a turbine. We have to watch the water go where it was going to go anyway and get the electricity on the other side, or the isotope that's going to heat up the water and spin the turbine. Like those are the better sources of energy for mining, not just because they're good for the environment, they happen to be, but also because they're the economic choice, the rational economic choice. Does that happen everywhere 100%? No, but on a net basis, it's hugely positive. And so that argument is just a function of time at this point, where the data needs to be collected, digested, and pushed through, you know, the academic meat grinder to put papers out on the other side. That's all happening. You know, I really recommend folks read the KPMG study, the Cornell study. Those are both great, and make it very, very obvious. We're seeing, you know, the Biden administration wants to add more regulation and penalties to wasted methane. I sure know a way to deal with that. You know, the mining community's been all over this for 3, 4, 5 years. We're already ahead. And we being the mining community have deployed huge amounts of infrastructure, capital, and efforts in capping flared gas, not because we have a huge ideological view on how much methane should be spouted into the environment, though many of us do, but because it's a rational economic decision to take a wasted resource and turn it into a productive resource. So I've said on this podcast in the past that Bitcoin demonetizes the political class and remonetizes the productive class. This is the second part. This is the remonetizing of the productive class, who now has a set of tools that can be brought to bear across a number of different wasted assets, whether that's underutilization or straight up just spit into the air, which is obviously a net negative. Bitcoin fixes this very, very obviously. And so I think the energy argument is sort of it solves some of Bitcoin's intangibility problem, because I go to an oil field, I plug in genset, I plug in miners, equals revenue, right? That equation is obvious and physical. So I think the miners are so well positioned to debunk some of these energy myths, and not only debunk the energy myths, but demonstrate an ability on a productive basis to be a solution. So that's happening. I think, the other side of it, and where the tangibility really is tougher is, in America or in England or in Europe or wealthy developed nations, Bitcoin is not visibly solving an inflation crisis. Go somewhere with 30, 40, 50% inflation and ask them, do they want local currency or do they want dollars or Bitcoin?
Well, so yeah, I'm going to agree and disagree with you on that. I'm just going to go back one step though. On the energy arguments, one of the most interesting things is that they now aren't able to just lie without pushback. So originally, like a couple of years ago, when people are lying about Bitcoin energy use, what you do is have a bunch of Bitcoiners come in and shout at them, say, you're wrong, and we just sound like a bunch of nutters. The community notes and the way people are getting community, whether it's some kind of like mainstream media source or Elizabeth Warren, they're getting community noted with facts. And so what happens is people who follow them are seeing the community notes. They themselves are seeing the community notes. So there's this pressure now on people that you can't lie. Like if you're just going to lie, you're going to get caught out and you're going to get busted. You're going to expose as a liar. We know Elizabeth Warren is a liar. We know she's a compulsive liar. Now she'll get community noted every time.
And to tie off on the New Scientist article, he has deleted his account.
Yes.
He was on Twitter in 2007. He has the handle at his last name.
Well, in fairness,
deleted.
Did you see Predator did the whole research into his wallets?
I sure did.
Yeah. Did you see that?
No, I didn't see that.
So Predator went through all his wallets where he bought and sold, and at the different times he bought and sold. Like it's just hugely embarrassing for him. And yeah, see you later. And New Scientist, by the way, of which I was a subscriber. I didn't cancel because of this. I canceled a couple of years ago. I was a subscriber at one point. I mean, I'd never go back because it's like, what science can I trust you on now?
The science.
The science.
Capital T, capital S.
Yeah.
Science is something that I think Bitcoin is going to be a huge boon for. I think the same, and maybe this is a little off topic, but I think the learned behavior that Bitcoiners are demonstrating to the world around dev sponsorship, I think we're going to see a proliferation of patronage. And I think that the patronage movement is going to proliferate across art. It's going to proliferate across science and investigative journalism, maybe, and Bitcoin development. So this model of wealthy benefactor has a vested interest in a future state of the world, and they will sponsor the research and sponsor the work in order to bring truth and clarity to different issues, or to put an amazing piece of art on their wall.
Because we've proven, well, we've had it seen that, especially over the last few years, these three-letter institutions, or these kind of, and I don't ever like using the word woke, but these woke educational departments.
It's just ideological capture, right?
Yeah.
The second that you're willing to prioritize ideology over process and alignment around a methodology is the minute that your institution goes to die, right? You need to be able to be a credible sense-making apparatus.
Well, it's collapsing around them. All this
the plagiarism stuff,
and
DEI.
DEI stuff at the moment. I mean, did you see the United Airlines stuff?
I did.
Yeah.
What was that? I missed that.
Well, there was you can find it now if you search United Airlines, but it comes up quick. There's an interview with their CEO, but they're talking about, he's talking about
how they recruit pilots.
Right. Based on gender and race.
Yeah.
Well, I just think that like there's a great history of American values where merit is the primary function. That doesn't mean that on an aggregate basis, some, whether it's racial or sexual orientation groups, were left behind and performed worse in the numbers. But at the end of the day, like if I'm walking into surgery or I'm stepping onto an airplane or I'm counting on the military to make a sound decision, I want to have a degree of confidence that is pretty unimpeachable that the person in the cockpit in whatever venue they are is the best person and is the most highly trained and highly successful version of a person that could sit in that seat. I just don't understand why that's controversial.
Well, it shouldn't be, but there is positive things you can do with diversity. I said to Danny when I had my advertising agency in London, our board was 3 men.
Yeah.
And we introduced I won't name her. Introduced a young woman to it. She didn't get it by meritocracy. The next person by skill set would have been a man, but she was the best amongst them women. And we introduced her into a board, and a couple of things happened. Firstly, we found out some issues with the ladies' toilets that needed dealing with. But the bigger issue we found out is we had massive social events, and she came to us and said, with the social events, a lot of the girls are leaving early because of safety. They don't want to, if we're out in, I don't know, Soho and we're doing karaoke till 1 a.m, some of them are a bit worried about their safety. And so that, ironically, became, I'll talk about that separately. But
You should talk about that.
yeah, I will. But so what we used to do is when we used to arrange our nights out, we would make sure all the girls wanted to stay. You've got a taxi booked. We only found out by having this girl on the board, and I think that's a positive thing. Totally suited the company. Ironically, fucking one of the girls who worked for us got murdered.
Oh my God.
Yeah, during COVID, Sarah Everard. It's fucking so horrendous. Yeah, so during
But what you're describing and the area that diversity made a positive impact, because I think diversity is a great thing, whether it's diversity of thought or diversity of representation. I think those are just like hard to argue against.
Well, we do it on the pod as well, by the way. Every trip we go on, we try to make sure that we haven't just got 12 dudes per trip. And again, the reason that came from, I've talked about this pod, so some people will be bored of it, but I had a girl at my house and she was asking about the pod. We got it up on YouTube and she's like, oh, it's all blokes. I was like, yeah. I was like, why is that an issue? She said, well, I got divorced and my husband took all the money and I got screwed. I do not want financial advice from a man. It's a fair point.
And every example you talked about is either audience development or social development, quality of experience. None of those are a hard skill. All of those are soft skills, which have a huge amount of value, right? You built a huge successful podcast. It's working. And those are arenas where I think diversity is a very effective tool. Pilots do not subscribe to what's the highest quality experience at the bar in Soho. Pilots subscribe to one KPI.
Don't crash.
Did we get there, and did we get there safely?
Yep.
Right? Did we get there safely is the only question a pilot needs to answer. A surgeon, was the surgery successful? One question that needs to get answered accurately. Same military, was the operation carried out successfully? So there's a number of arenas where, DEI and sort of capital DEI, not sort of the in any contract, right? There's the spirit of the contract and there's the letter of the contract. And I think, that concept carries over to many other areas. There are a number of fields where merit is the beginning and the end of the conversation. And there's a number of different fields where merit is the beginning of the conversation. We just need to get on the same page that we cannot use a panacea, this DEI backdrop as a panacea for all skills, all trades, all roles. For many roles, it's a huge positive. For some roles, it has no place in the room.
I agree. Yeah. Going back to our laggards, our skeptics, I am starting to notice that we are seeing some penetration into some of the mainstream with some better informed articles. It seemed to happen at a time where BlackRock announced they were going to have an ETF. Maybe pure coincidence. But crossing that chasm itself is super important. Crossing that chasm where we just get factual, honest reporting on Bitcoin is going to be super important, especially over the next year, couple of years, because we have got these people within their brokerage accounts have now got exposure to Bitcoin, and they're going to be considering it themselves, or the people who manage their portfolio are going to be. And so it's a weird place we're in at the moment because we've got some pro articles and some negative articles, not always factually based. But I think we're crossing. I kind of feel like we're crossing all these chasms this year. That's what I think's happening.
Yeah, I mean, I think just like being sort of binary anti-Bitcoin is a pretty marginalized position over the course of this year. Saying Bitcoin is bad, taking the Bitcoin is bad. It's a Ponzi scheme and it's for terrorists and money launderers and fraudsters.
Yeah.
Like that viewpoint should become pretty fringe, basically, at this point.
That's one of the things that. So I'm definitely not anti-ETF, but I'm not very excited by the ETF. But one of the things that I am excited about is the massive advertising campaign that's going to come from Wall Street. I think that's going to be the most bullish outcome from the entire thing.
Did you see BlackRock's today?
I've not watched it all, but it was
boring.
so boomer.
It was so boomer.
They're the ones with the money.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to appeal to your asset owning audience.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, and I'll take boring over FUD.
I'm massively pro ETF with a certain amount of watchful eyes over the behavior of the people issuing the ETFs.
Mm-hmm.
We have to be careful. But I am massively pro. There's two reasons I'm massively pro. Oh, actually, there's loads of reasons. I like the fact that we've removed the unit bias for some people who want to buy Bitcoin because they're buying a share. That's really useful. They don't see $44,000.
They see $41, and that means something.
Yeah,
on the back end.
And once it gets up to like $1,200, they're probably going to halve it and whatever. Double the shares. So I'm keen on that. I really like this concept of portfolio rebalancing, whereby it's like, okay, we've got a 5% allocation to Bitcoin. Therefore, if Bitcoin goes up, they reduce the allocation, goes down, they increase it. And that kind of dampens the volatility, which I think will also be a positive thing for Bitcoin. But I love the validation is given.
Yeah. There's a few pieces of the ETF I think that are really valuable. One is that, if you believe that Bitcoin is a tool of financial freedom, it can mean that in a few different arenas. On the one hand, as a bearer asset and a self-custodied asset, I think Bitcoin serves its highest value function. But just being able to allocate from a price perspective also serves a great function. And so if I'm looking at folks who are saying, I got $1 million in stocks, let's turn that into $900,000 in stocks and $100,000 in Bitcoin, those people will benefit massively from the proliferation of Bitcoin across the economy globally. And so just offering a tool that makes more people able to benefit from Bitcoin, I don't think the cons outweigh the pros. It's not how I'm going to choose to use Bitcoin, but it's how a lot of people are going to choose to use and benefit from Bitcoin. And that's good.
What are the risks? What do you think the risks are?
I think the risks are, the good news. Let's just go to the more of the good news first. Yeah. I think the ability to only have the ETFs print on a cash create basis is really interesting. So typically, let's just say I launched a stock ETF and I were, BlackRock, I would go to one of the, call it a prime broker. So the way that a prime broker works is it's basically like an investment bank. So Morgan Stanley is a big one. Goldman Sachs is a big one. Bank of America has a big one, but it's segregated away from Bank of America retail banking. So it's really a financial institution desk that trades with funds and pensions and all these huge asset managers. That's what's called prime brokerage. It's a particular class of brokerage for particularly large institutions. And let's just say I'm a big hedge fund or a pension fund, and I have a $1 billion of stocks at Goldman Sachs. They're all sitting there. Goldman is then going to make money by doing things with the assets that are sitting on their books. So if I were to create an ETF that has 10 stocks in it, and I were to create a new share, I have two ways of creating a new share under a non-Bitcoin ETF product. I can go to Goldman and say, I'm BlackRock. I go to Goldman and say, hey, I just created a new share. I need 7 shares of this, 15 shares of that, 19 shares of that, and I'll borrow them all. And I borrow them, I create the unit of the ETF, and then I either go out and buy those shares and give back the borrow, or some other mechanism by which I create the shares. That's called an in-kind create. So I'm able to borrow the shares that make up the basket that goes in the ETF. I create a new share, I give it away, and then there's a bunch of financial engineering that happens on the back end after I've borrowed those shares and created the new unit of ETF. Bitcoin doesn't work that way. If Bitcoin worked that way, I'd be able to say, okay, I'm BlackRock. I'm going to go borrow 1 Bitcoin, create the equivalent number of shares against it. Then I can hedge that borrow. I pay some interest to borrow that Bitcoin, and I can do a lot of stuff on the back end to kind of settle it out. And I have more time and more ability to do so in a more like low slippage, low market impact way. That's not how the Bitcoin ETFs work. Bitcoin ETFs are what are called cash create. So BlackRock takes in $1,000. They then have to go buy $1,000 of Bitcoin. There's no in-kind creation. There's no borrow, create. There's none of these other sort of more traditional mechanisms around an ETF that would typically be in place. So cash in, buy Bitcoin. So the signal in the Bitcoin price and the market is going to be less obfuscated because the dollars into the ETF directly correlates to the amount of buy pressure that gets put on the circulating supply of liquid Bitcoin. And then I'm queuing up for the next chart. So there's let's hold this dynamic idea in mind on the one hand. Then let's go back to the fundamental properties of Bitcoin. Fixed supply asset. That's how it works. There aren't any more, right? Nobody is going to update their software to say, give me the $42 million version. That's not happening. So you've got a fixed supply asset only available on a cash create basis. That's a very, very, very extreme combination for price appreciation if you see net positive inflows.
It's just a shame that it's also only cash redemption.
Yeah, there's that component of it, but yeah, it cuts both ways for sure.
Is it only a shame because we've got this GBTC selling block?
No, not necessarily. Well, that's one, but I think that's short term. But the issue is if you ever want to, so I think most people that come to Bitcoin will go to a Coinbase or something first. They'll buy Bitcoin, they'll leave it on Coinbase, and eventually there's like a natural progression where they might listen to the podcast, learn about self-custody, and then end up holding that Bitcoin properly. But with this, there's another layer of it where they then have to go and sell their ETF, pay tax
consequence,
and then go through the same steps. Like, whereas if it was you could do an in-kind redemption, then you could go straight from the ETF to cold storage.
Okay, fair.
Yeah. Look, I think the burden gets put on all of us to continue educating as aggressively as possible about the value of self-custody and self-sovereignty.
Can there be a time where these ETFs change and they allow this?
It's a regulatory change.
Yeah.
I think the ETFs would like to do it the way that I described first.
So Gensler, he gave us as much as he gave us the minimum.
Yeah, I don't know that I'm willing to hang this all the way on Gensler. I think the accounting standards around all of this stuff is where a lot of the nuance kind of emerges. So like, great, how do you account for all of the mechanisms, both on the creation side and on the disbursement side? That's hard. And I think the SEC, we can be frustrated all we want with Gensler and some of his policies, but like the rank and file just want to do what is, compliant and investor focused. So I'm not willing to hang sort of this as like a flip the bird to Bitcoin kind of thing. I think it's sort of the inner workings of the accounting office that this came out of. Okay,
just one last thing on the lagos thing, because we will move on this, but do you think there's also another issue in that, again, I don't want to be hyperbolic, but we go down this Bitcoin rabbit hole.
Mm-hmm.
And the further we go down it, I think the less empathetic we are at the people peering over the edge of it, right? Because we're so much further down. But in going down that rabbit hole, you do start to see the world in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
You see money in a different way. You see the value of money, the value of holding money. You have your time preference. There's a lot of things change. Do you think actually that we've lost the empathy for that? Because I know I didn't get Bitcoin. I didn't grok it the first time I heard about it. If I did, those 80-pound Bitcoins I bought, I would still have. And I'd have a shit ton more.
Yeah. And
it was 4 or 5 years later till I then bought again. And then it still took me a bit of time to really kind of grok it enough. Do you think these people are essentially doing the same as what we did, but they're doing it very publicly?
Mm-hmm.
And actually, like, we've lost a bit of empathy. And look, it's good fun to make fun of them, but at the same time, they're fundamentally two different worlds. It's like a paradigm shift from a fiat world to a Bitcoin world.
Totally.
And if you try and fit Bitcoin into the fiat world, the same fiat thinking, it doesn't really work.
I think there's sort of layers to it a little bit where, I don't know that you need to think that, Bitcoin's going to replace all base settlement layers as
Agreed.
It doesn't need to win. A 30% market share is a massive, massive, massive win. And I think there's lots of people who are going to be able to engage with Bitcoin, the financial asset, in fiat world. I think Bitcoin fits into fiat world really easily.
Especially with your ETFs.
But even before that, we're seeing a tremendous amount of tailwind for, Bitcoin the asset and Bitcoin companies and, all the public miners. There's a lot of sort of fiat world Bitcoin financial asset and Bitcoin enabled financial asset opportunity that comes together with, seamlessly. I think it's more of a radical shift, to be able to say that, hey, the really interesting thing that's happened is that, Bitcoin has introduced competitive markets for money and government behavior.
Great. I'm just going to go back a step.
Mm-hmm.
So if we go back to when we talked about why do people vote, general consensus is some ideology, but usually because you want it to make your life better, financially better, right? When somebody first thinks or hears about Bitcoin, what do they think it is?
Ooh.
Speculative investment.
Speculative investment. Might go up, might go down. They probably hear a lot more about it going down than going up because there's that celebration.
Red.
Yeah. But they don't think of it in terms of, say, 21 million. I always think back to an interview I did with Parker Lewis where he went on about 21 million. He's like, this is the most important part of Bitcoin. We had a conversation last night, and I agree with you. It goes hand in hand with censorship resistance, but that 21 million.
Yeah, hard provable digital scarcity at the 21 million mark. It's arbitrary, but it's required.
Yeah, but once you understand 21 million, it helps you make different choices. For example, I'll give you two. One's fun. But when I bought my house, I got the biggest mortgage loan possible because I wanted to hold as much Bitcoin as possible. To have a lower mortgage, I'd have sold my Bitcoin. I know over that 30-year mortgage, my Bitcoin is going to make me so much more money.
Many more
right?
houses.
Yeah. Give you an even better one. You'll love this one. I hope I haven't told you this story. So it's a bit of a confession on the podcast, right? So October the 1st, my corporation tax bill was due. We keep all our profits outside of 3-month cash flow in Bitcoin in the podcast. Our corporation tax bill was £177,000. So I would have to sell Bitcoin at that point. I think the price of Bitcoin was about 22,000, right? So I called up my accountant and I said, Laura, what's my corporation tax bill? She told me it's about 8 Bitcoin. I was like, okay, cool. I was like, what happens if I don't pay my corporation tax bill? She said, you still have to pay at some point, but until you do, you have to pay 8% interest. I was like, okay, fine. So anyway, we've got to where we are now, 4 months on. The price of Bitcoin is like 44,000.
Now you owe 4 Bitcoin.
And I owe a $2,500 fine.
Easy.
Yeah. But I wouldn't have done this in a bull market, but pre-bull market where we were, it was an obvious decision. And so I think about money and time deeply with big decisions, house, corporation tax bill. I think about it in terms of that because I understand the 21 million.
Yes.
When I introduce people to Bitcoin, this is the first thing I talk about now. It's like the only thing. I don't talk about censorship resistance. My friends don't say, do you know what? I couldn't buy my cup of coffee the other day. I need a way to have censorship resistant coffee pressure. They don't talk about that shit.
No.
All they know is they're getting hit by inflation, they're getting hit by higher taxes. Yeah, they know all this, and I try to explain the 21 million. It's a good starting point. And I think that's a new world way of thinking.
Yeah.
Because in an inflation environment, you can't think like that. You have to think about getting rid of your money.
Correct.
Who keeps money in their bank account? I don't.
As little as possible.
Yeah. It's either in Bitcoin or it's in other assets, right?
Yeah.
Appreciating assets. Most people can't think like that. And so I think the world has been totally gaslit into this inflationary world where 2% inflation is the target. If we don't have that, we go into a deflationary spin and the world ends.
Yeah, well, the problem is that we need the inflation to manage the debt.
We don't need it.
No, governments and large corporations need inflation to manage debt.
Yes.
Right? We borrow, if I borrow $1 trillion today and spend it, I'm going to pay back less than $1 trillion in purchasing power over the 30, let's just say it's a 30-year bond. That, basically the trade is, it is the ultimate demonstration of the canceling effect, right? I'm able to borrow. Not only am I getting the first money, I'm getting the cheapest money first to spend. And then I worry about the bill over a long period of time when that currency is worth far less than the purchasing power I was able to bring to the market at the time that I borrowed it. Best trade in the world if you've got access to the spigot.
Yeah, there was interesting as well. We brought up Natalie Smolenski tweet recently. She was retweeting Luke Roman.
Yeah.
And she was saying most people would rather a slow managed depreciation of their fiat money than a volatile increase. What was it? I get the wording right because she did it better. And I think this is one of the things that's been tough to try and get people across the line with, in that inflation, unless you're living in Turkey or Venezuela or Argentina, inflation has like this insidious, slow, corrosive effect on you. It's like if you look in the mirror tomorrow, you look exactly like you did today.
10 years later.
10 years later, or even a year, you look very different.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that's what inflation is like, generally, for in Western nations.
It's the opposite. I forget if it was Bill Gates or Bezos who said it, but most people vastly underestimate what they can do in 5 years and vastly overestimate what they can get done in 1 year.
So let's read this again. So many people would rather be certain that they will lose money slowly by pretending monetary debasement doesn't exist than take slightly more risk to make money slowly by waiting through volatility.
Yeah.
And so
I totally agree.
So when I explain the 21 million to a friend and I say, this is what it does, this is what's happening with inflation, this is monetary debasement, it's always a couple of questions. I'm too late. I thought Bitcoin died. It's too volatile. And I'm always trying to say to them, look, I can't guarantee this, but history says any Bitcoin you buy in a 4-year period will always give you more purchasing power than when you bought it. Generally. But the volatility scares them off. The unit buyer scares them off, but the volatility is what scares them off the most.
Yeah. Look, you're not going to, Bitcoin's not going to fix human fear. So and I think that's why Americans, I think Americans are really good at owning some Bitcoin. I don't think Americans are great at owning a ton of Bitcoin yet.
Explain that.
Because I think it's easy to say, I'm going to peel off 5% allocation, 10% allocation and put it in Bitcoin. I think it's really hard to say I'm going to pull off 50% allocation or 90% allocation and put it in Bitcoin. I think those are the sort of, that's the chasm that the wealthy developed world is going to struggle with. Bitcoin may force this upon them by turning 5 to 10% allocation into 50% allocation. And so they may end up there by accident with less Bitcoin, but in the same portfolio construction. But I think, I really think that the inflation resistant argument is hard when you work in a place that has low inflation or relatively low inflation.
Yeah. You have to do that first 4-year cycle.
Yeah, you got to get through it, you know? And to me, that's why I'm so, we talked about the different Bitcoin business models, but like, that's why I get so excited about mining, is because it forces you into a Bitcoin dependent operating model. It forces you all the way into Bitcoin. And the reason that it does that is that the value of your ASICs is largely a function of the price of Bitcoin. The value of your revenues is a function of the price of Bitcoin and the fee rates. And you've got this variable revenue side of the business and this fixed dollar side of the cost structure. And so you're in the trade by nature of operating the business fundamentally. And so, it sort of forces you into that positioning just by nature of how it works.
What will be interesting, give it a couple of years, say we do go through a traditional bull cycle, and all those people who have allocated capital via these ETFs have made significant gains, and the ETF issuers themselves are kind of making good money off them, and themselves have kind of been validated, is how the public discourse happens at that point. Because there's going to be enough people in traditional normie world who've now benefited from this. There may be journalists who've got it as part of their portfolio construction within their brokerage
401k
account.
or whatever.
And so we might move to a world where it's like everyone's starting to think, holy shit, I need this. That kind of straight into the S curve. Obviously, they'll all be buying the top.
Of course, we all buy the top. The thing I'm interested to see is, where does Bitcoin differentiate between a piece of a portfolio within the status quo to a core operating model tool at the individual level? That's a future chasm for us to think about. I think right now, the people who, and maybe it lags, if we go back to the early adopter, innovator S curve or bell curve, we see that, the current cohort is in this, like, I'm going to buy some. I think it's great. I think it's part of, what I want to do more broadly. But if you lag back a cohort or two, those are the groups that are saying, I'm going to run my life on a Bitcoin standard. I'm going to run my company on a Bitcoin standard. I'm going to run my fund on a Bitcoin standard. And then those are the ones who are actually a chasm or two ahead on the layers of Bitcoin adoption in their own, individual lives.
See, Max Hillerbrand said it to me. He said, we went out for dinner in London. He's like, yeah, I'm fully Bitcoin, 100% now, Bitcoin standard. I'm like, really? Do you not fear about the volatility? He said, Pete, every cycle, what do you wish?
I own more Bitcoin.
I had more Bitcoin. He's like, yeah, every cycle. So like, I'm just eliminating that from my life now. I don't have that anymore. I don't think about that anymore because I made the jump. Jack Mallers has just done it, hasn't he?
Yep.
I'm pretty sure Mac's been doing it since like 2017.
Yeah.
It's been a long time.
Yeah.
I do. I have literally negative money in the bank.
I'm close. It's tough because like the football club, the bar is a full fiat business.
Yeah.
There's no Bitcoin bar in
there's
business.
no way to.
Well, no, it's coming. So what will happen is we're going to introduce Bitcoin payments for the event next year. This year. And so it will start to hold. It'll do what the football club does. Everything the football club takes in Bitcoin, it keeps in Bitcoin. And it's stacked 6 Bitcoin. Not a lot. Might buy a stand at some point, right? The bar will do the same. The podcast always has 3-ish months cash runway. And it's worked out actually quite nicely in that those who pay us in Bitcoin, that kind of balanced that out. I haven't actually had to go and buy Bitcoin with our profits. The amount we get paid in Bitcoin just kind of balances that out. Personally, I guess I'm living theoretically, like spiritually in a Bitcoin standard, but I still have a lot of fiat. I still got a fiat bank account. I'm not getting rid of that in the short term. Do you think you're probably more than me then, aren't you?
I literally am like negative in the bank. I just live like month to month on my credit card, pay it off at the end of the month, and anything else goes into Bitcoin.
How close are you? You're willing to declare? None. I have no Bitcoin.
Yeah, I have no Bitcoin. You're both further along than me. Number one is that like the vast majority of my net worth is tied up in the company.
Okay, it's equity.
So
yeah, but that's leveraged Bitcoin anyway.
Yeah, so I would say like on a percentage basis, like I'm overwhelmingly allocated to our company, and that is a Bitcoin derivative.
Are your family into Bitcoin?
Yeah.
You got them?
My dad.
I got my dad recently.
Yeah.
Yeah. He asked me, he was like, Pete, should I buy Bitcoin? He's got like this pot of cash that basically is our inheritance.
Yeah.
And he was like, should I put it all in Bitcoin? My dad gets nervous about everything, right?
Yeah.
He's very cautious. I said, Dad, how much longer do you think you're going to live for? He's 75. He said, if I get to 80, that would be yeah,
He's getting
I,
80.
I'd have done well. Yeah, he smoked his whole life.
Yeah,
I think he will. He looks good. My dad looks good. He's young. But anyway, I was like, so we have a hug. We got 5 years left. And then I said, I got 2 questions for you, Dad. The money there, whatever it is, you make up a number so I don't dox him.
$100,000.
That $100,000, do you think that's going to buy you more stuff, the same amount of stuff, or less stuff in 5 years' time? He's like, less stuff, of course. He understands inflation. I was like, okay. The bit you know about Bitcoin, no, you don't know a lot, but you know a bit. Do you think the value of that Bitcoin will buy you more stuff, less stuff, or the same in 5 years' time? He said, oh, more stuff. I was like,
So what's the issue?
yeah, if you're not going to spend that money for 5 years, here you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I tried to get my parents to sell their house at 26,000 Bitcoin.
All right, that's ballsy, man.
I did not succeed. I was like, guys, well, my sister and I are out of the house many years now, and I left New York and live in the beautiful city of Nashville now. And I'm like, guys, like you don't need the house anymore. They're like, yeah, but like it's going to take some time. I was like, or it doesn't.
Get on with it.
So they did not sell the house and buy Bitcoin.
Well, you need somewhere to live. I don't think that's a bad decision.
I'd like sell the house and live in a hotel till you figure it out.
Yeah. Release the equity.
Yeah.
Put it in
but
Bitcoin.
That's putting a lot of risk on your parents, though.
Yeah, but this is his inheritance. They're
I
being
have a vested
selfish.
interest here.
Yeah.
I want that Bitcoin. But they get it. They, my mom, what's interesting is that they actually understand Bitcoin very differently. My dad totally gets the financial layer and totally gets like inflation, understands what the ETF means. He was a lifelong CFO. So he's like very much like financially literate. My mom, God bless her, is not what I would call particularly financially literate. But she's super Bitcoin culture literate.
Love it.
So she's like, oh, this is like freedom. And this is like, you're like fixing social problems with this tool. And like, I'm all in on that. So my mom is like the cultural Bitcoiner and my dad is like the financial Bitcoiner in their relationship. And so it's a very healthy mix.
God, I wonder what my mum would have thought of it. She mainly wouldn't have cared. I think she would have just been like to my dad, "Oh, Jerry, fuck it, YOLO." So she was that kind of person. She didn't care. Yeah, I don't know. I said to because my son's become a bit of more of a Bitcoiner over the last year when he started working for us. I put money by for him every month since he was born, and he was allowed it when he became an adult. And he said he wanted to put one in Bitcoin, so he did. It was like whatever, a certain amount of money. And then he's just gone off to Africa.
Yes, sir.
So he said just before he went, he said, "Dad, I'm thinking of selling my car and buying Bitcoin." I was like, all right, cool. What's the deal? He said, well, look, I'm not going to use it for 3 months. And I don't know what's going to happen with Bitcoin next 3 months. It looks positive. I was like, fine. And so he got a price on it. He was gutted with the price. And I said, look.
Bitcoin will fix that.
Yeah, I said, well, he expected to get another £1,500 for it. And I was like, no, that's the margin of the company buying it, cleaning it, and selling it.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to do that, you'll get it. But you now have to do the job of selling it. And you're going to Africa in 3 days. So he went, he's a company called We Buy Any Car, they take off, and he bought the Bitcoin, boom, price dropped. But I said, don't worry about this. I said, the lesson I wish I'd had, and I understood in 2017 when I first bought Bitcoin, is the dollar price in the short term does not matter. What matters is how many sats you can accumulate.
Correct.
And I said to him, just get as many sats as you can, as quickly as you can. And just, it's like Michael Saylor. There's no second best. Sell your house. Yeah.
I mean, look, it's the only asset I can think of that I would be willing to buy and go to sleep for 10 years and wake up. It's the only one. Do I think other assets will do great? For sure. But I don't have nearly the same degree of confidence in anything else than I do in Bitcoin. And therefore, I've built an entire life around it.
Yeah. Danny's been like that last year. Danny's been trying to make me more. I've been bullish, but Danny is.
I've been mega bullish. No one's bullish enough. CK.
Yeah, CK. He'll be here this week.
Yeah. The dollar. I tell you where the dollar price becomes really important for me is that when it means I become more of a seller of Bitcoin. Because there comes a time, like people say, "Oh no," so there'll become a time I'll be a seller because I know what I can do with that for other people.
Yeah, and look, like the game is not to die with the most Bitcoin. The game is to accumulate enough Bitcoin to be able to be the most useful version of yourself.
Yeah. There's a number I want to know. What is the percentage each year that I can spend and my purchasing power
doesn't go down.
doesn't go down.
Yeah.
There will be a number that
Yeah.
you can aggregate it for.
Yeah. I mean, the old math on a 401k is that you can retire when you can spend 4% of your 401k per year.
Doesn't sound like a lot.
You need a big 401k to do that. But if you retire at 60 and you live to 90, that's a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Well, listen, I've talked about in this podcast a long time ago. When I got divorced, my pension pot was like £100,000, not a lot. And I got cut in half. And I went to a pension advisor and I was like, look, what do I do here? I can't remember. I was like 34. They're like, what age do you want to retire? I was like, I don't know, 50, 55. They're like, how much do you want to live on a year? I was like, £40,000 would be cash free. And they're like, which by the way, I live beyond that at the moment. But I was like, £40,000. And that means I can pay my bills. I've got no mortgage. I can go on holiday once a year. I'll be okay. Why are you laughing? Because you know what I'm going to say, don't you?
No, because I don't think your lifestyle is supportable by £40,000.
Well, not my
It was
current lifestyle.
£40,000 10 years ago as well.
This is my retirement lifestyle. This is me
Pete,
and my
Partying
dog.
around the football
Pete.
club.
Yeah.
you're a toy guy. All right.
You don't get many.
Some people are toy guys.
Okay, but just say for the sake of this,
sake of
for the sake of
this.
this.
Okay.
So she said, I need a pension pot of 2.2 million.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, hold it. So I've got 18 to 20 years to save 2 million. So I need to save 100,000 a year. At the time, I wasn't even earning 100,000 a year. And she was like, you've got to set your expectations lower. She was like, what will most likely happen is you'll save as much as you can. When you retire, you will have a pension. Whatever property you have, you will sell. You'll move to a property you can afford, and you'll live on the equity you've made in that and whatever your pension is. I was like, this is fucked.
Well, I mean,
So I never got a pension. I just bought my money in Bitcoin.
and it worked out.
Hallelujah. Not yet, but trajectory.
It's working out. In the process of working out.
But sorry, by the way, this is what I said to my son. I said, you get this right with your Bitcoin, you will never need a pension.
Mm-hmm. True. Yeah. The math, I was talking to the ARC folks and Kathy Woods this week, or last week around the ETF stuff. And they've got a price model and what they think Bitcoin can be. And she was like, yeah, my base case is 600,000 a coin. My real case is like 1.5 million a coin
By 2030.
by 2030.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's kind of reasonable. Like I looked at their math and like nothing in there is like a huge like outlier, prediction in any of the the components. And that's, that's what I really mean when I think like, if Bitcoin's obviously better than gold,
Uh-huh.
right? It's better than gold today, right? I don't have to pay to assay it. I don't have to pay to move it or store it and whatever. Like the carrying cost of gold bullion is massive. The carrying cost of Bitcoin is zero. So it's immediately better than gold. And then I look at gold's market cap and it's somewhere between, 10 and 14 trillion. I'm like, all right, well, that's now like the worst case scenario for Bitcoin. If that's what happens, like we all did phenomenally well. Now that doesn't achieve my ideological desires,
Which is
to provide a tool to the world that can increase freedom and decrease hardship.
But I think it does that. I've told you my like middle class thesis, right?
Mm-hmm.
You give me eyes with that.
I think that the delta between Bitcoin price and Bitcoin impact can be wider than you expect.
Of course. For the listeners, I'll explain my thesis in that I'm probably bored people by saying this. We travel a lot with Bitcoin. We go to a lot of countries. And everywhere I go, the majority of people I'm meeting and talking to about Bitcoin who are buying Bitcoin and building the Bitcoin businesses are middle class. They are middle class. Now, fiat debasement, it destroys the middle class. Okay? It just does. We've seen it. I've seen it in the UK. We've seen it everywhere we go. You eviscerate the middle class. So if Bitcoin succeeds, it's going to reestablish the middle class because the middle class are the first people to go in it because they've got the disposable income and the education to do it. The elites, the richer people, yes, some of them are getting into Bitcoin. I think there are millionaires and billionaires all around the world who don't own Bitcoin yet. They might have some exposure, but they don't own it, right? If you're right, by 2030, Bitcoin is 1.5 million. But even if it's 600,000, whatever it is, we are going to become the new allocators of capital.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're going to create the businesses, the new businesses. We're going to create the employment opportunity. So my thesis is fully that it's not bottom up, it's middle out.
I totally agree with you on the middle out thesis. And, so to be clear, my view is that Bitcoin, the social movement, and Bitcoin, the value of the asset, are going to move, in pretty close to lockstep. And I think that's good. It's just a fundamentally good technology. We just watched the David Bowie clip.
Yep.
Where he basically groks the internet instantly. And I think you just replace internet with Bitcoin and it's the same thing. There is a transformative impact that sound money, provable digital scarcity, available to all, transactable by all. I think the runway for transformation that offers society is beyond massive.
What are the areas it's transforming most, and what are the mechanics? Like reduction of bureaucracy?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think let's take I'll talk my mining book more. I think that what Bitcoin is doing for energy and for the components of mining, just the hardware, is the most powerful and obvious case of a pure open market grinding away inefficiency everywhere in its path. You look at some of the hydro in just over the border in Canada. There are 1,000 megawatts that just go over the top of the dam with nowhere to go.
Put some scale on that, because I don't think everyone understands what that means.
It's like an entire nuclear reactor sitting there unused. Right? Think of the biggest power plants in the world. The biggest nuclear reactors are somewhere between 1.2 and 1.4 gigawatts. It's like one of those just sitting there churning 100% of the time, unused.
What percentage of the hash rate could that be?
10%.
So 10 of those is the entire.
There's the entire network.
Wow.
Yeah, there's just this massive underutilization of our electric infrastructure that's all going to reach somewhere close to peak utilization over some multi-decade period of time. And it's important to say this. Our electric system is over-engineered on purpose. We need more generation than average consumption because the whole system has to be designed around peak usage, not average usage. There's a huge gap, so let's look at a graph of a day. Here's the hottest or coldest point. Most usage is happening, but the system has to be able to deliver that the whole time. There's a huge gap in between the usage curve and the generation curve. Bitcoin can fill that entire gap. That means energy companies have a ton of revenue they didn't have before. That means reinvestment in all of their systems, both in terms of quality and in terms of expansion. So all of our quality of life is better when resources are better utilized. And Bitcoin is going to bring that to energy markets in a dynamic and urgent way with very, very little gatekeeping. That's immediately obvious. And I'm going to take you all the way into the micro for another area that this has happened. The power supply units that power the miners. If you go to an airport and those charging stations in airport terminals, those cost for the equivalent electric output as a single miner, those used to cost about $600. Mining came to market and super aggressively iterated and drove the cost structure on that power supply unit down somewhere between 25 and 30% of the previous cost. So if I buy the equivalent power supply unit for a miner that used to go to an airport, it costs somewhere between $150 and $175. That's just an area that never had a market to force the hardware costs down. So Bitcoin mining came to power supplies and went to all of the design and manufacturing choices and said, you need to rethink this and turn this from a $600 cost to a $150 cost. And it did it. That's going to happen in so many other places in the economy because you take a totally hard money scarce asset and you say, if you want to acquire these, you need to be able to strip your cost structure down as far as possible. And then it did it. So other areas that this could disrupt, 3.75% transaction fees for all your credit card processing. Gone. What if everything cost 3.5% less? What do we do with all that extra money? We do a lot with it, because every dollars are not created or destroyed when they're applied to cost savings. They move somewhere else. So maybe those go into personal investments. Maybe those go into Bitcoin investments. Maybe those go into buying something else in the economy. Maybe those go into starting a new business. But there's a huge drag. All rent seeking is a drag on the economy over a long enough time scale. And so if you're able to disintermediate rent seekers out from our processes, that means that there's more disposable income to allocate to higher quality goods and services. And there's also a higher amount of free cash flow for investments into what we want to see in the world. And so, one of the theses I have around what Bitcoin could do is that there's probably a 10 to 100x improvement in goods and services that will come because think about what I'm willing to spend my Bitcoin on. I need a much higher quality good or service to separate me from my Bitcoin. So I'm not going to buy fast fashion. HODL has a great term, which is the high velocity trash economy. This is the way that we get out from the cycle of the high velocity trash economy and start entering into the high quality, long-term time preference orientation economy. And so I'd much rather buy a pair of shoes or a pair of pants that are 5 times the quality, that are going to last me 5 times the amount of time, and I'll pay 2 to 3 times today's price for something like that. And that's something that could convince me to separate myself from my Bitcoin.
Well, that's why I very much like the idea of crushing the rent-seeking and bureaucracy of the state, because I can only think about the things that I want to do locally in Bedford. And there was this great Alistair Milne tweet, which loads of people have done before, where it's like, you start a company and you make a profit and you pay corporation tax. And you pay yourself a dividend, you pay your dividend tax, right? And then you go and you buy yourself a house and you pay whatever. You have property tax here. We have...
you just rent your property from the state.
Yeah. And then you go and buy something from the shop and you have sales tax. And then you die and you have inheritance tax. And it's snip all the way down. And honestly, for every pound my company generates, I wonder how much I actually gets to me. Maybe 20p in the end.
Purchasing power.
Yeah.
How much purchasing power are you able to bring to bear for every pound that you generate in net profit?
Well, you think of the bar I bought, whatever the price of that was. Does it matter if I declare what that is?
Yeah, don't say it.
Okay, don't say it. Again, you pick the number then, so it doesn't matter.
1 million pounds.
Okay, it was nothing near that, but just say it was. How much money did I have to generate to build that business?
2 to 3 times.
2 to 3 times that. But then I have all these jobs I'm supporting. I want to open a new bar. Say that cost me £250,000 to open that new bar. I have to probably generate £1 million of business.
Exactly.
But I am creating 10, 20 jobs when I do that bar. Now, all that rent seeking by the government, are they creating that many jobs? Are they fuck? They're not creating that many jobs from that money. They're redistribution. And this isn't me being like completely anti-state. I'm just saying I recognize the ridiculous high bureaucracy and ridiculous high rent seeking from the state, and that is stopping the productive people in society allocate capital to new business.
There is a reason why economies grow when taxes go down. I don't mean to be,
dude, just
left curve Harry, but
see if you can find the chart where it shows like the old Eastern Bloc countries' GDP compared to Russia's, like Russia versus Estonia GDP growth. Every one of those, Ukraine, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia especially,
Czech, yeah.
Their GDP growth compared to Russia's is fascinating.
But you've
Look
heard
at
the stories
China.
of like when the Soviet Union collapsed and they had like a government-owned company making fridges. And when it collapsed, they ended up stripping the fridges because the actual gold in the fridges and like the precious metals are worth more than they were selling the fridges for. It's just like, makes no sense.
And it's important to remember the crown jewel of the American economy is the American market. Right? That is our single best asset, is our ability for capital formation and capital deployment. And anything that ends up hindering that, it's part of why, we talked about with the cash create concept, like you're basically forcing users of the product into a tax disadvantaged position based on how the Bitcoin product is going to work, the more that we can move towards a smoother and more efficient tax regime around the investment products we use, the more we can be high value members of society because we're going to do more with more. Would you trust the government to be your money manager?
No.
Exactly.
I mean, it's been a long journey of shedding my status skin, but like, it's gone. They're again, it's this Bitcoin thing. And it goes back to that Bowie thing, in that you have the information now.
So one of the big innovations, I think it was in the 50s, maybe 60s, you would hire somebody who lived in DC who would go to the filing office when all the quarterly filings came out, and you would physically read the paper first. Then you migrate into an environment where you're getting access to all the filings digitally, and you're still getting it faxed to you first. Then you're moving up and up and up and up the scale of when do you get the information and how do you action the information, all the way to high frequency trading. And so and maybe it's a large language model digesting the reports, not a human reading word by word, right? So there's this information acceleration that happens from hiring a person to live near the office to run to the library when the filings come in, to a fax machine, to an internet, to an LLM. Like you see the through line very directly. I think we're starting to see the breakdown of a lot of these line items that just don't make sense and don't make us a more successful society. There's a lot of issues out there, political and not, where the misallocation by people who have a broken incentive structure, right? So the worst thing you can do is give somebody with bad incentives a lot of money to make decisions about. That's a really bad recipe for prosperity. And so if you're able, you can fix the incentives, you can fix the pot of money they have access to make decisions around, but ideally you'll fix both. And so, if you go back to, the way that a government budget's created, like we're spending a $1 to $2 million drone or a $1 to $2 million missile to shoot down a $20,000 drone. We're just upside down on the trade. Now, we can't not shoot the missile down, but we really need to figure out a better way to not spend $1 to $2 million on our side for every $20,000 on their side.
Yeah.
And
or $65 million on a set of stairs.
Exactly. Or any of these infrastructure projects where they get $10 or $20 million into the design process and then shelve the project. Right? All they wanted to do was be able to say we're doing something.
Yeah, it's like the HS2 in the UK. How much money have they wasted on that? Like
Ridiculous.
billions.
I wouldn't even know.
Have you seen the $1 billion bus stop in California?
The $1 billion bus stop.
Oh yeah, they spent like some ungodly amount of money to
I was literally just Googling that.
put a little canopy over a bus stop. Between the permitting.
Yeah, and I was hearing about the Big Dig in Boston was another one.
There's so many examples of this that it's very hard to not become jaded about it. Where this is what they're taxing us for.
I don't know if this is the exact story you mean, but it's just
$1
another
million
example.
bus stop.
Yeah.
The super stop. The super stop. First of 24. Yeah.
So like you tell me, is that it just ain't worth it.
Yeah.
But if you think about, if you can go back to meritocracy, what is the meritocracy of working at Griid? Like, what do you have to do? What are you going to prove to deserve to work at Griid?
Well,
and
so
keep your job?
In mining, it's really easy. We have internal uptime standards and budget standards and timeline standards, and if you don't meet those, then you're not qualified for your role.
At Royal Bedford, you've got to play well, and if we lose games, we've got to see why we're losing games. We've got to improve the players.
Yeah.
Right? Where's the meritocracy in government? It is a vote based on what you say, your words, and then you get 4 years.
Exactly.
And as long as you don't have a scandal, you're still there, right? And there's this really fascinating interview. There's a podcast in the UK called The Rest is Politics. And it's hosted by a guy called Rory Stewart, who once wanted to become Prime Minister. He was a candidate to become Prime Minister.
Mm-hmm.
And Alistair Campbell, who I'm not a huge fan of. He was in Tony Blair's, I think he's Tony Blair's like PR guy. But you've got Conservative and Labour together, and they debate topics, and they talk about things. It's super interesting. They interviewed John Major. I don't know if you know who he is, but
I know the name.
he was the Prime Minister following Thatcher.
Okay.
everyone thought he was kind of boring. He didn't have the best reputation. Actually, he's super smart. Listen to this fascinating interview with him. And he said, the problem with politics now is the background of the politicians. He said, historically, if you were a Labour politician, you probably had some success in building business. You'd had some success, within your community, maybe in Liverpool, Newcastle, wherever or you were head of a trade union. You'd done something. You understood the labour force.
Yeah.
And conservative tended to be more like you may have been some high-ranking soldier. Like maybe you'd been I don't look at armies, but a sergeant or a lieutenant, whatever it is that's high-ranking. And so you'd come with discipline, but you'd done something to earn the right.
Proof of work?
Yeah, you'd done proof of work. Now what you have is young people who decide to become politicians.
All out of the same school.
All
from Eton.
Yeah, all from Eton.
Proof of stake.
Or even locally, in the local community where we are in Bedford. And look, I can tell you some of my dealings with the council. I can throw them. Well, let's fucking throw them under the bus. Fuck them. But they don't have any experience in the things they're actually making decisions on. They don't. So when they're making decisions or regulations that affect business, they don't understand business. What's happening in Germany and in Holland. Do these people really understand farms and farming? And this is why there's the pushbacks from the farmers. Do they understand right now there's a big problem in the UK with pubs and restaurants and bars because the massive increase of energy costs has made it unaffordable. Like it's killed the margins on these businesses. They're closing all the time. The people who are making policy, what have they done that means they're educated in the right way to make these policies?
They're just activists.
Activists, career politicians.
What's the difference?
Pretty much the same, I guess. I mean, look, I've been interacting with the local mayor in Bedford and the local council with my football team, and it is crushing me. Yeah, they made a decision recently at very short notice to pull the lease on our football club. We just negotiated a lease, a brand new lease, right? Long-term lease, so we had the place for our ground. The mayor told them at very short notice, brand new mayor told the council, don't sign the lease.
Why?
Came to complaints from another football team locally. There's a rivalry with us in Bedford Town. They didn't like the flags we put up or some bullshit. But anyway, he said, we're going to find you somewhere new. It's like, great, where? Well, we got 3 sites. Okay, what are they? Well, 2 of them are unsuitable for a football ground, and one of them has covenants on the land, so we won't be able to get it. There'll be planning issues. But by the way, because we now don't have a lease, we can't now get the funding we need for the upgrades, because every time you go up a league, you have to do a ground grading.
Yeah.
More seats, more cover standing, turnstiles, whatever. You get funding from the Football League to do part of this, maybe 70%. But the problem is you have to have 10 years on your lease, minimum. Otherwise, they won't do it.
Yep.
Now, we have to do those upgrades ourselves. Okay, fine. But we're doing them not knowing if we're going to be there in 2 years. We currently don't have a lease. And so this is, and every time we ask for an answer, it'll be another week. It's 4 months. Our grading's in 2 months. This, honestly, I can't decide whether I need to become the mayor or just like blow it apart.
Well, but this is, and this is, I think the late stage capitalism meme gets overplayed, but like, this is not baking the pie. This is cutting the pie and maybe throwing the pie on the ground. That's the part of the cycle that they're engaging in, right?
Do you want to know the stupid part of it is?
Yes.
So I went to see the mayor, sat down with him. I said, I'm going to take you through a presentation. This is my plan for our football team. It's our 10-year plan to get into the professional leagues. Never happened in Bedford. This is the capital that's coming in. This is our turnover. This is our investment in youth football now that we've done and women's football. Look, we just won a league and now we're top of the league, and our ladies team who came bottom last year are now top of their league and won every game. This is the investment that's going into the town. These are the people who are coming from America to come here and watch games, and they're staying at the local hotels, eating local restaurants. Oh, by the way, we did a mini conference last year. 150 people came, booked out the whole hotel, and they came and they spent money in this town. Oh, by the way, that's now going to be 800 people, whatever, this year. Like, this is everything I'm bringing into town. You're the mayor. This is part of your job, is to recognize opportunity and support it. I've shown you everything. Like, it's a bullish case for Bedford.
Yes.
Bedford was not on. There was no reason to travel to Bedford ever. There's a small reason now for a group of people. And it's happening.
It's growing.
And it's happening, yeah. Every single home game we have, there will be at least one couple, family, who from America, who've come to Bedford for this. And sometimes it's multiple. Hundreds. I would estimate Over 1,000 people have traveled from outside the country and come to Bedford for a football match now.
Agreed.
Like, that's money coming to the town.
Yeah.
Did you get it? Oh, it makes me angry.
Yeah. And this is, this to me is one of the reasons why having an appreciation for local politics and local positive sum thinking, like that's where we go to win. Is, these are, I don't need to convince the president or the Senate that Bitcoin's amazing. I need to convince 1,000 towns in America that Bitcoin's amazing. That's much more exciting to me. Do I think we'll win at the federal level? For sure. But I also think that that to me is sort of in some ways the least of it.
But does winning at the federal level come after winning at the local level?
I actually think it's you can help Bitcoin at the local level and you can hurt Bitcoin at the federal level.
What do you mean by that?
So I think that the federal level is where Bitcoin can get injured. Bad regulation, bad policy, all the stuff that that some of the folks are proposing these days that I think is wildly, at the best it's wrong, and at the worst it's totally unconstitutional. So I think the federal level is avoiding a negative, but I think the local level, which excites me a lot more, is promoting a positive. It's why we did the park in Nashville. It's why we're in Tennessee. It's why, talk about middle out, that's geographical in America. We're going to win Bitcoin middle out. And so I think like you can influence a town or a city or a region to be powerfully pro Bitcoin and infinitely positive from that perspective. I think at the federal level, I think you can have lots of pro Bitcoin folks. We've had, incredible experiences with both Tennessee senators. We've written letters to the Tennessee governor that have been really well received around what we've done to support the electric system. But really a win at the federal level is avoiding the bad stuff. A win at the local level is promoting the good stuff.
Yeah, I love that. That's our first ever intermission.
It was needed.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers. Cheers.
Cheers.
This is the Snow Day pod.
Yeah.
We've got nowhere else to go.
How's your energy drink?
My energy drink is working as intended. I'm on a full month of no alcohol and full carnivore.
We intended to do that, or I intended to do that, and then we got to pub key and it ended very quickly.
Going dry January is very hard when you're in a bar, ideologically. How can I turn up at my bar and expect people to come in and drink and celebrate dry January? So I celebrate wet January. I drink double.
I love that.
I drink double what I drink normally.
Perfect.
No, I don't. Congratulations on that. So, an interesting thing we talked about last night is Bitcoin culture. In that, when we cross the chasm and we radically move up the S-curve, there's kind of no Bitcoin culture. I mean, there will be niche pockets of historical Bitcoin culture, but a lot of Bitcoin culture will die. There won't be one homogenous culture that stretches all across Bitcoin.
There's not one homogenous culture that stretches across Bitcoin now.
There's some.
Yeah.
There's some.
Well,
maybe in our circle.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think, what will replace what we call Bitcoin culture today is an increasingly strong alignment with an unclear understanding of the Bitcoin core properties.
Yes.
So the technical and economic properties of Bitcoin will do the heavy lifting that culture is currently doing today.
Yes, that I 100% agree with. I
think Bitcoin culture is going to be completely eroded, though, in general. Like, with more and more people coming in, we're just going to become a irrelevant niche.
Well, I think about it, I know I'm the broken record today on my niche historical examples, but, think about like the founding of America. I think we are, amongst the founding fathers and daughters of liberty. Like, that's our current.
Are you George Washington?
No, I would aspire to be a George Washington, but I don't think I make the cut.
I think you do.
Well, you're kind, but he was a towering figure of George Washington is one of the most impressive people that has ever lived.
See, if I tried to ordain you as king of Bitcoin, I think you would appreciate the honor and reject and not accept it.
Exactly. My job is to deliver as much value to Bitcoin on a per block basis as I possibly can.
There's no kings here.
Yeah, no rules, just rulers.
Yeah. I think it's going to be a hard thing for people to accept in that the Bitcoin adoption will accelerate quicker than adoption of some of what people think Bitcoin culture is.
100%.
My grandfather had a very good saying, which is that your reach should always exceed your grasp. And so what that means is, and I think, like the OODA loop, that's a scalable idea where me, the individual, I should always be reaching further than I can grasp. And I think Bitcoin as a global tool is currently reaching beyond its current grasp. The great part is that the grasp keeps expanding, and the reach keeps expanding. And so, there's this gap in between what we aspire to be and what we are. And the goal is not only to close that gap, but to stretch the absolute distance further, sooner. And so I think, why Bitcoin has been so attractive to so many is not only all of the great properties of Bitcoin. Those are all true, and those are all, enormously valuable. But I also think we're at a point in the life cycle of a true foundational technical innovation that, when my thesis for getting into mining at the beginning was if I do this for 5 to 10 years, I will be among the most expert people in the world at this thing. Why? Not because I'm particularly special or smart or even that early.
10,000 hours.
But I'm just going to bank the time
Yeah.
now. And nobody else has had the opportunity to, because Bitcoin mining is such a new thing. This was 2017, that if I just do this for 5 to 10 years now, it'll be really hard for people to catch up because I'll have banked so much time in this market already that I'll get to be an expert. And we're halfway there. So I think that Bitcoiners have been enjoying this huge outsized opportunity. It's going to get more competitive, and the opportunity to differentiate yourself amongst this community, that's going to shrink because the pool's going to get bigger.
Yeah. I mean, it has been fragmented anyway. I mean, even if you look at our conference in Bedford in April, coincidentally, it's on the same weekend as BitBot Boom. I actually reached out to Gary and said, look, I've just realized this. I apologize. And he said, don't worry, I moved mine because of Nashville. We're talking about it, but we kind of agree. Was like, we're actually two entirely different markets. They're both Bitcoin conferences, essentially, but it's probably targeting a different kind of guest and a different type of audience, in that he very much is traditional, old school maxi crowd, hardcore kind of Bitcoiners, attracting the red state kind of Bitcoiners mainly, and whereas ours is much more kind of center ground European event with a different kind of guest and different kind of audience, and so that's a fragmentation, and I think a positive fragmentation. But then you can also look at what Jason Meyer's done with his book, and there's a progressive Bitcoin podcast now, and it was traditionally the progressives that weren't really into Bitcoin. And they've come in as well. So I guess that fragmenting is happening, and that Bitcoin is now permeating other groups rather than bringing everyone centrally. It's decentralizing. And
no technology movement succeeded at scale without having broad-based appeal.
Yeah.
The access to the internet is not a liberal conservative divide. Everybody uses the internet. Email, automobile, electricity, all of these kind of societal foundation layer innovations. Everybody says, this is kind of a nonpartisan, not a non-ideological issue.
I do think some people are going to struggle with this because
Yeah.
I think there's some people who see Bitcoin as creating this almost monoculture of ideas and ideals. But actually what's going to happen is, as I see it, is the properties of Bitcoin, they have they have like a shift. They call it a shift in society. And it's like a function change that is going to spread outwards. And maybe because of that, there will be a wider, broader cultural shift in society. But this kind of how do I put it? This kind of maxi culture that's been created. That it's not this. I'm not criticizing. I'm just saying I don't think that's going to scale in the same way, because when your Bitcoin maxi who lives in New Hampshire or Texas or Tennessee is going to be very different from your Bitcoin maxi who lives in Bangkok, who lives in North Korea, who lives in Canberra. Like you can go and so I think that's going to shift.
I think maximalism is a function of your portfolio, not a function of your ideology.
Well, I don't know. Depends who you are. Some people, I think, it has been. I think some people have made the ideology their identity, which is a mistake.
Of course, anytime your identity gets out, never outsource your identity.
Yeah,
right. We see it in politics today, all over the place. We see it in Bitcoin culture. We see it everywhere, and this is sort of the modern degradation of discourse. Is really rooted in this problem where you outsource identity either to a group or to an idea or to something else. And so, if the less in touch you are, and I'm getting on a soapbox, but the less in touch you are with who you actually are, what do you actually believe? What do you actually spend your time doing? Those are what drives a clarity of self. And when you're better able to align who you think you are, what you want to work on, and the value that you can provide to the world. This is why I think the like billionaires shouldn't exist meme is the dumbest thing in the entire world.
Yep.
Because nobody goes to Amazon and says, I don't want this because it's making one person rich. What Jeff Bezos did, what Steve Jobs did, what these incredible entrepreneurs did was deliver hundreds of times more value to the world than the wealth they accumulated along the way. And so that's how I view getting rich. If I want to be really, really rich, I need to deliver an insurmountable amount of value to the world in order to earn my place amongst the balance sheets that get what they deserve fundamentally in a market.
Yeah.
So if I don't deliver value, I don't get wealth.
Yeah. Interestingly, on the Amazon thing, I mean, I've never thought I don't want to use Amazon because it's making Jeff Bezos rich. I have at times questioned whether I want to use Amazon because what I think it's done to the labor force. And look, I know
and
there's
local economies as well.
Yeah, local economies.
The high street in the UK decimated, and like Amazon's not to blame; it's just outcompeted it, but it has happened.
And look, if it hadn't been them, maybe it would have been somebody else. But I'm less more at the high street. I just know the extreme pressure maybe some drivers are under.
Or what Costco's done to distributors, or what Walmart's done to distributors. There's no doubt that there are negative externalities of these innovations and these improvements on user experience.
Because really, Amazon is a centralizing force.
Amazon's a centralizing force via barrier to entry, right? It takes $20 billion of investment to build their logistics arm. So therefore, every business that can invest $20 billion is a worse product. Then you add a network effect on top of that, and it becomes a pretty insurmountable business model, at least in the short to medium term, to outcompete.
Yeah.
You can do so with quality, and this is what I think Bitcoin unlocks, is it unlocks convenience versus quality parity. So I'm equally likely, so let's just say I'm ordering dog food. I have a little puppy, and I order his dog food on the internet. Why? Because I don't want to lug a 50-pound bag of dog food through the shop, into the car, from the car, to the house, up the stairs. Like that's a bad user experience. So I go to Amazon and I have the dog food delivered and it shows up at my doorstep. Now, what would break me out of that purchasing process? If there was a 10 times better dog food that my local butcher made, now I'm buying local because convenience has degraded relative to quality.
And that is happening on the personal consumption of meat.
Exactly.
You've seen that.
The ranch movement.
Ranch movement. Was it go and shake a rancher's hand?
Go shake a rancher's hand. Like
yeah.
And so this is why I'm so bullish on Bitcoin and Bitcoiners, is that they are allocating towards the quality end of the barbell and away from the convenience end of the barbell, because convenience is fundamentally subsidized by fiat.
Yeah. Yeah, they're weighing up the options. Yeah. Yeah. Is there anything you do worry about? Anything you worry about specifically with Bitcoin? Because this scaling out of Bitcoin, scaling of adoption, there are some important cultural elements. So the most important cultural element of Bitcoin for me is the move slow, don't break things. I love Bitcoin conservatism.
Yeah.
Like, especially around the protocol. And we are seeing now, since ordinals, there's a shift there. There's some battle lines being drawn where people are saying it's been too slow. We need to move fast, break things. There's people who are talking about new bips that they want to get their monkey JPEGs on or cat JPEGs. And, and I've gone around the circles in this recently with a couple of people. But I think I've got to the point, say, when we had the conversation with Rizzo, where I was like, look, I don't really care if people use the Bitcoin network to share JPEGs.
In consensus transactions
I'm okay with
are
that.
valid.
What I worry about is there a shift in the culture of Bitcoin, in the culture of BIPs, in the culture of development, where it becomes a little bit more Ethereum-like?
Yeah, that's bad.
Yeah, that's what I'm worried about. This is why, I'm pro-conservative Bitcoin OG developers, because they care about maintaining the strength of the system, the low downtime, it's just historically Bitcoin doesn't break very much at all. And that's my biggest worry now.
Yeah, look, I think that in the world of risks to Bitcoin, I think the social geopolitical risk profile has improved greatly in the last 12 months. I think the technical risk profile of Bitcoin is similar, if not nominally not as strong right now. And that's I think that's the biggest area for fear is technical failure within the Bitcoin context. And I think, where I used to skew on the fear scale was around a bug. And now I skew more towards bad development as the more pressing concern. Whereas I used to have probably slightly more confidence in the likelihood of a new piece of code being introduced to Bitcoin that ends up either breaking or introducing an unintended consequence. I used to rate that lower than an existing bug. Now I go the other way. I think an existing bug is lower likelihood than a net new change being more likely.
So that isn't even just bad development. That's feature abundance.
Yeah, I mean, look, and to dunk on our Ethereum friends, complexity is their business model, right? They introduce complexity for the sake of itself in order to basically run an extraction program on the protocol over a long period of time.
Yeah.
We don't want that.
Here's our 20-year plan.
Yeah, exactly. Go look at a flow chart of how their software is designed and cry. Whereas you look at sort of how Bitcoin has developed over time and the conservative nature of the brilliant developers who've brought us to where we are today, and it's incredibly conservative and it's incredibly low time preference. As Bitcoin, Bitcoin culture and Bitcoin development culture go pretty hand in hand. We talked about this example last night, but I think it's apropos, which is that the way that U.S. Funding bills were managed historically was department by department, appropriation by appropriation, and there's a single bill per budget. Then somewhere along the way, we entered into sort of this omnibus regime, where rather than one department, one bill, you ended up in sort of all departments, one big, slush bill, where there's a lot of stuff in that bill that maybe the American people wouldn't agree with, but by nature of increasing the surface area of the bill, the opportunity for net negative compromise became very, very available. That became a real risk in that environment. And I think you're seeing a little bit of the similar progression in the way that Bitcoin development is trending, which is one feature, one BIP. Rather than now, when a release goes out, it's sort of more of an omnibus release that does a lot of things in a lot of different places, and that's a trend I don't really like.
There is a lot of push right now for BIP 300.
Is that the drive chain one? I wrote a whole article with another Griid employee, Rory Murray, and Amanda Fabiano. We wrote this in Bitcoin Magazine, basically why the mining community is not prepared to work through drive chains. We don't like the drive chains. The drive chains introduce just an enormous amount of unnecessary
Can you bring that tweet up?
risk and complexity.
I can't bring that tweet up because he's blocked me.
Can you not go anonymous and find? I want to see the comments on
They've
it.
made Twitter really hard to use anonymously.
Really?
Let me try and find it. Or can you just send me that picture? I'll pull the picture up.
Well, no, because I almost want to see the comments that go with it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can log into my alt.
You can probably guess who's blocked me.
It's weird that
Small
did he
porch.
block you just because he blocked me?
No, he blocked me because I called him out for lying. and he was just lying.
Okay, now take this back. Op CSFS plus opcat can do drive chains. On its own, it's of minimal impact. The trouble is the combinatorics. I never even I know what that means, but I never even heard that word before. Of each how opcat can be combined with a proposed change to Bitcoin. Offhand, if I recall correctly, opcat enables a form of drive chain. Shinobi's replying as well. No, they do not only affect users who opt in. The nature of drive chains being unable to restrict the nature of the sidechain itself, and it rules means that activating them blows open every possible MEV door on Bitcoin, which affects every user of the base layer. So we don't want MEV, right?
No, I mean, at the end of the day, like the role of the miner in the way that the system design works is that every pool share has an algorithmic amount of revenue associated with it. So how does that work? We plug in a bank of miners. They generate a share. That share gets sent to the pool, and the pool and the miner have an agreement around how each share gets paid. And that share revenue calculation is a function of the mining rewards and a backward look on the fee rate. So there's a formula that determines miner revenue, and that revenue is broken down on a per share basis. What MEV and what drive chains do is it distorts how that revenue algorithm gets calculated and introduces a whole new set of incentives around that, so that, you know, transaction inclusion versus exclusion versus rollback versus, you know, chain tip stuff, like all of that becomes a much kind of
Gameable?
murkier, totally gameable, but also just murkier process. And so the fairness around proof of work and whatnot. So let's use a real world example. FTX lost a lot of people money, and maybe they'll recover it because the crypto assets have performed. But they defrauded a lot of people. Imagine that FTX settlements all happen via drive chain, and now all of a sudden there's a huge bankruptcy case and a huge amount of legal and political pressure to roll back the drive chain that settled out the FTX payments.
And what's rolling back the drive chain is materially much easier than rolling back.
Well,
base
it
chain.
forces every miner to vote on whether or not to roll it back or not. Because what a drive chain does is it inserts into an open spot in the block the update to the drive chain logic. This is this blind merge mining thing that isn't in the drive chain spec, where, you know, theoretically a miner doesn't know how the drive chain process works. So, or not how the drive chain process works, but like what is the updating of the state of the drive chain associated with the Bitcoin block transaction inclusion that updates the drive chain state. Now let's say something really bad happens with the drive chain. Like imagine FTX were a drive chain. Now all of the miners have to go and potentially reorg and go back. There's this totally unrelated to Bitcoin consensus and block processing component that will influence every miner that is voting on how to update the state of Bitcoin.
So hold on. I mean, because I fully don't understand this. So drive chains, they piece together part of a block.
So,
but that's more of a rather than be cemented by other blocks, that can still be rolled back easily.
Well, no, now you have to roll back the blocks. Because the drive chain created a huge amount of crime and fraud and loss of money. And now what if the economic power of let's just say it's 3 blocks ago. And let's say all the economic purchasing power that moved in those blocks was $100 million. But the drive chain just lost $8 billion with FTX. Now all of a sudden there's a huge incentive to go screw up with how the Bitcoin blockchain functions. It's a massive change in incentives and will introduce an enormous amount of pressure on miners to behave outside of an algorithmic revenue function per share of proof of work.
See, this in my simple world is what becomes the problem, right? So I'm a monetary maximalist, and I've kind of like, on the ordinal side of things, I've kind of been like, oh, okay, I don't care, or I don't like them, or I don't mind them. I'm like pretty indifferent, right? Spent a bit of time with Rizzo and him explaining them to me and saying, like, they're positive for this reason. I'm like, oh, whatever, okay, they're cool. I don't really care. In consensus, I'm okay with that.
In consensus transactions. Don't change consensus to make more room.
But it's the monetary maximalists developers are thinking about what is the best thing to make Bitcoin the best money. And then the ordinals crowd, they want to create their flashing cats or whatever they want to do, their wizards, whatever. Do they want to do things to Bitcoin to make ordinals cooler and better?
Yes.
Yes, which can conversely have a negative effect on Bitcoin as money. Can they want to introduce things that damage the monetary properties of Bitcoin? That's what I worry about.
Yeah.
And with an increasing influence and a loud crowd, a great division, can that happen? Will that happen? Because that's the bit I worry about.
It can happen.
Yeah.
I don't think it will, and I really hope it doesn't. You know, I think at the end of the day, like, Bitcoin has found enormous product market fit as a money and as a digital asset that can be storing value or can be transferring value both between people and over time. That's the core product market fit that Bitcoin has achieved to the tune of $900-800 billion in purchasing power. And in order to change the technical components of that system and onboarding risk in exchange for programmability, different functionality, like, that's just an upside down trade.
Okay.
Right.
Well,
think about how Ethereum works on development.
I don't think about it ever.
But it just isn't functional, right? There's a reason why Bitcoin has accrued monetary premia across its history, and the things that got us here are the absolute most likely things to get us there.
What if, I mean, you talked last night about exceptionally large blocks in terms of feed. Talked about up to maybe at some point we might see 50 Bitcoin.
Yeah, I think we'll get a 50 Bitcoin block again.
We had a bet on that.
We have a bet on it, Danny.
What if 40 Bitcoin of that is JPEGs?
Great.
But what if then it starts to feel like this is more of a system for moving data than Bitcoin?
Bitcoin doesn't have feelings.
No, but the people. I'm not about Bitcoin. I'm on about the people involved. They have feelings and they have incentives.
Correct. And the piece about ordinals and non-monetary uses for Bitcoin is that if we're right that Bitcoin is going to be the highest performing version of itself when it's operating as a money, they're separating themselves from their Bitcoin to pay for transactions that will ultimately degrade in economic power over time because their use case is inferior to the monetary use case.
Buying a sat for 10 Bitcoin.
Exactly. Exactly.
Still
Ultimately,
find it insane.
Ultimately, that's kind of my base case, is that there are going to be a lot of experiments and a lot of money spent on transaction fees and inscriptions and all this different stuff. Great. That sounds like really, really valuable mining revenue that gets delivered over a period of time. And if their use case doesn't pan out, there's still only 21 million Bitcoin, and they've spent a huge piece of that on a percentage basis than they have left afterwards.
Well, it's going to be a wild couple of years.
Well, I forget who did the analysis, but I think if you extrapolate the fourth quarter run rate on fees, we're looking at a $4 billion fee revenue year ahead.
It's insane.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
So like the mining trade right now is just so interesting because basically miners have made 4 bets. They're betting on Bitcoin price going up, on fees going up, on energy staying flat or going down, and on hash rate staying flat or going down relative to the first 2 levers. So this was a brutally painful trade in periods of time over the last 2 or 3 years because energy prices went up a lot, hash rate went up a lot, and Bitcoin price went down a lot. Now, if that changes around, the mining positioning is Bitcoin price will go up and fee rate will go up more than energy will go up and hash rate will go up. And that's a really interesting spot to sit in within the growing demand for Bitcoin via ETF and all the other different reasons why Bitcoin is an unbelievably attractive asset. And that the fee rate and the distribution, broader distribution of the coins, usefulness of spending Bitcoin and transacting in Bitcoin is going up. There's tons of companies and projects out there that are making Bitcoin spending more exciting and meaningful, and miners sit at the front of that tailwind.
And how do you feel as a miner going into the halving?
It's the only business in the world where your revenue is getting cut in half in Bitcoin terms every 4 years. So look, look at
that smile.
The purchasing power of a Bitcoin block was highest during the most recent epoch, not during the 50 Bitcoin blocks. So the purchasing power of the mining reward in a block was highest ever during this mining epoch. I really hope that the purchasing power of a mining reward in the next epoch is higher than this epoch.
So the trajectory is right.
So the trajectory thus far has been right, but past performance is no indication of future results.
Well, we will see. I'm out of topics. Anything you want to talk about?
I mean, just that Bitcoin has been one of the greatest gifts I've ever had and gotten to be a part of, and it's just the most fun. I meet the most incredible people and have such a high quality life because of Bitcoin, and I expect that to continue for many years to come.
Come join us, listeners.
See you in April.
If you're not, see you in April. Cheat code.
Yeah, my shill is come visit us at Bitcoin Park. I'm incredibly excited about the progress we've made at Griid, and I'm incredibly excited to join you guys in April.
Well, listen, we love making shows with you, Harry. You know it. I still think you got the best voice in Bitcoin.
I appreciate it.
Love everything you've done at Bitcoin Park. Big shout out to Rod as well.
Yep, Rod and Odell. I couldn't do it without you guys.
Rod is a bit of a hidden gem. Everyone knows Odell. He gets enough shills. No, but I love you. I love what you've done. We love coming here. Nashville is a second home to us now. We love the park. We like all the meet spaces. So what up, man? We'll see you in April in Bedford.
Yes, sir.
Cheat code, come join us. All right, buddy. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.